Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome all. Today we have a special little history that we are going to learn together. Since the British Blobcraft Corporation is in the news, with Trump now announcing not just a $1 billion, but potentially $5 billion lawsuit, I believe he said. Let me confirm this. Trump, $5 billion lawsuit, BBC. $5 billion lawsuit threat against the BBC amid a spate of other wins. 25 million from YouTube, like 10 million from Meta, like 16 million from the what was it ABC or CBS or MSNBC? 16 million from CBS. Yeah. So amazing. 16 million was the settlement from CBS, and as we showed, it's 17 million is how much USAID pays the BBC. So if BBC settles with Trump for the same amount that CBS did, it will be all USAID money paying Trump. But what I wanted to talk about today is a topic I've been meaning to tee off on for a while, which is the strange role of the BBC in the censorship industrial complex. We're going to start there. Our general itinerary is we are going to hit the BBC Marshall Plan of the Mind, then the BBC's role in the censorship industrial complex, and then we're going to bring it together with a watch through of a video that I've been wanting to watch, but we'll watch it live together, which is this new Anatomy of a Color Revolution about the Biden blob color revolution in Bangladesh last year, tying it together with the Biden USAID and BBC joint $4 million Youth Rise propaganda initiative to get the Bangladeshi youth to rise up. And I think that will be a useful thing to cover, so that when you see, for example, the BBC amplifying Black Lives Matter or protecting Antifa or any of these other destabilization networks in the United States, you can see how USAID and BBC teamed up to do that in other countries. So let me begin. We're just going to do something chill. Get in the mood. You ready for a little adventure? Looks like there's rain up ahead. I am. Let me pull up my notes. Feels like my day could be turning. Like I can tell that my luck's gonna change. If you could see me now, I'd probably let you down, but that's enough for me. You got me begging, baby. Looks like I'm on my knees again. All right, let me explain how we're going to tee into this. I got very intrigued because I keep seeing BBC Media Action involved in the censorship industrial complex. And I wonder if actually maybe I can pull up a Photoshop. Let's diagram this out, as we'll do it live so you guys can see what we're going to get really down and dirty here tonight. All right. So what you have in a very common setup here is you have an entity that is kind of like the operating company. let's put 20. Okay. Let's just call this BBC News. Okay. And BBC News is going to go, let me just merge these real quick. Merge these layers. Okay. BBC News is going to have a primary function, which is to hit you the audience with your messaging. You're the audience here. Okay. But that's just one news outlet. It's a big news outlet with tons of affiliates and pickup everywhere. But what's better than just having a English language only one news source telling you something? What if you could surround the audience by having something called BBC Media Action, which is a foundation? What if you could have something better than just one news source hitting the audience? What if you could create a surround sound of BBC lights like this? Okay. So what if you could create a spawn army? So what most people see when they see the BBC is just the BBC, yeah? They see this. And what they don't see is what the BBC's foundation is doing to fund all of these spawn media entities who are hitting you from all these different angles to create the surround sound that is your narrative consensus. If it was just the BBC who said COVID vaccines are safe and effective, you might say, well, there's 9 other media outlets who are taking a different angle. Why would I trust the BBC? That's where the BBC's handy-dandy sidekick, its 501c3 foundation, British equivalent, British charity, funds all of the surround sound that hits you, and you don't think necessarily they're affiliated with the BBC because you don't go to their donor page to see who's paying the piper. Now, you'll notice this relationship is very similar to what happens with the Soros Foundation. This setup, I want you to keep this in mind as a general way of how the world works, not just in the propaganda front, but also in the political influence front. So let me give you an example of what I mean. I'm going to take all these layers, I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to show you something else. Okay? Instead of calling this BBC News, we're going to call this one, we're going to call this Soros Management Fund. This will be, it's worth it for us to go through this exercise right now, because we're going to be referring back to it in a number of ways. And we're going to call this Open Society Foundation. And we're going to call this Market. I'm just going to call all these nudges. But this, what I'm showing you here, and I'll put a little dividing line. Every big business at this point, with very few exceptions, has the same setup that we're about to get into tonight about BBC News and BBC Media Action. I defy you to find a big business that does not have something like this, where they've got a core operating company that you know it as, and a core buyer of that product or service. But then attached to that company, you have a foundation which creates or seeks to create the spawn of influence nodes around you to make you want to buy this product or otherwise help another revenue stream like a government contract. I'll give you an example. The Soros Management Fund is investing in clean energy solutions. They're investing in non-gas stove technology, electric stoves, no gas, no fossil fuels involved in stoves in Africa. Now, they're going to take long equity positions, the hedge fund, in clean energy stove technology, and possibly short players in the fossil fuel based stoves. That's what the fund is doing. The fund that makes money for the Soros empire, Soros Inc. Now, what you can bet is everywhere the Soros Management Fund is taking a market position, its civil society implementer, the Open Society Foundation, will be funding all the little influence nudge nodes to push the market conditions that profit the hedge fund. Do you understand? For example, let's make this real clean. And don't worry, we will get to the BBC stuff, but I want to present this framework first. Okay, let's see. Clean stove technology companies, Africa. Mukuru Clean Stoves. It uses recycled metal to manufacture cook stoves. We work with local women and business owners. In fact, let me use like a clean example actually with Soros stove investments, so we don't even need to be hypothetical. And as we're going to see, this is a useful thing to keep in mind because Soros was one of the early investors in BBC Media Action. Maybe I'm getting ahead of the story here. Let's go to stove. I asked ChatGPT to tell me all of George Soros's investments in biodiesel companies. So instead of regular diesel fuel, clean, biological, bioenergy, biodiesel. And one of the things it spit back was in Mozambique, a $9 million investment between 2010 and 2012 in Clean Star Mozambique. Yes, it is Clean Star. Okay. That was the first direct Soros social impact investment in the rural biofuel market. So these are plant oil and ethanol cook stoves marketed in Maputo, Mozambique. What was the name of that? I guess that was Mukuru, not Maputo. This is Kenya. So let's just check out, for example, Mozambique, Clean Star Mozambique. Okay, part of the Clean Cooking Alliance, which you can bet is going to be one of these Soros-funded influence nodes. Getting back to you're going to create these alliances, these civil society alliances, and the Clean Cooking Alliance is going to lobby their government to put government mandates, to put government subsidies, to beef up the clean cooking industry, in which Soros has taken a $9 million local investment. Not a grant, an investment. This is not giving away the money like the Open Society Foundation does. What's that quote? I'm not giving it to you. I want something for my money. A return on investment. So let's see. It's a vertically integrated clean energy venture. That's the value chain for household energy products and agriculture. Ethanol fuel cooking stove. And now my guess is, just like with all the clean energy companies, this is not something that would compete in the market, in a fair market, in a free market. It's probably more expensive. It's probably costlier in terms of building up a supply chain and infrastructure. It probably needs a government to help it, to help subsidize the companies with taxpayer dollars, or to mandate that the market in that country only or disproportionately use like some quota set aside, 35% quota, some climate fund, like John Podesta being in charge of the $375 billion climate fund. In addition, the Open Society Foundation influence nodes, in addition to creating Mozambique-specific NGOs, all nudging, for example, a government to change the market conditions to profit the Soros Management Fund, you can bet there will be an international one. For example, in Brazil, at the COP30, they announced a $1.3 trillion collective investment in climate finance. It's a good thing the Soros Management Fund is so deeply invested in this market, because you can bet when $1.3 trillion pours into all of the portfolio companies the fund has invested in, those stocks are going to go through the roof. And you can bet the Open Society Foundation was nudging all the different political organs within all of the members of the COP30 International Alliance to pour this 1.3 trillion in. So are you seeing how this game works? You can do this with everything, right? Like, think about the Ford Foundation. Wow, when you type in Grokpedia, it shows you the Wikipedia. Wow, Google has like blacklisted Grokpedia. Damn. I guess this isn't Google. This is DuckDuckGo. I wonder what happens on Google. Okay, there you go. Oh, no. Huh. Interesting. Grokpedia. So let's go to Ford Foundation. Now, what is the Ford Foundation? The Ford Foundation, getting back to our little map here, I'll explain it like this, okay? So the Ford Foundation started off with the Ford Motor Company, and then the Ford Foundation, as it went from being a national car company to an international car company, where instead of the market, the customers, just being American car owners or would-be car owners, it became a global market, exporting cars all over the world. Now, if you want to compete in global commerce, the best way to win that competition is to team up with global government influence agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department. So the Ford Motor Company created the Ford Foundation, and the Ford Foundation would team up with, let's just create another thing here. Let's call it let's just call this the CIA. Okay? Make it real clean as an example. Okay? And we'll add another box here for target government. So sometimes the way the nudge will work is, instead of just nudging the market directly by having these NGOs or these sponsors of the Open Society Foundation or the Ford Foundation, is not just to influence you to want to buy a portfolio company product through media, through education, through what you're taught in schools, through a big cultural push or music concerts to promote clean energy alternatives. But sometimes the best way to do it is to have these nudge outlets nudge the target government You following? So that the target government nudges the market. And again, you can take this with anything. What is the Carnegie Foundation? It's an offshoot of the Carnegie Empire, the Carnegie Business Empire. What is the Ford Foundation? It's an offshoot of the... Hold on a second, let me just save this. You can do this with everything, right? Carnegie was steel. Rockefeller was oil. Ford was cars. These are all international markets. And in order to influence the market to make more money for the operating company, a foundation is created to nudge the market and to nudge governments to nudge the markets to benefit the operating company. Every one of the major foundations is attached to a major business oligarch. And oftentimes, when the CIA has the same goal for the target government as the foundation, then they are natural partners. They are peanut butter and jelly, and they become fused together as one in the blob. Do you dig? Let's just go to, for example, the Ford Foundation, because this is another, I believe, early sponsor of BBC Media Action, as we'll see. So we'll pull our Wikipedia. Actually, we'll start with the Wikipedia because I know what that looks like already. Okay, the Ford Foundation. Founded in 1936, the interwar period, by Henry and Edsel Ford as a 501c3 in New York City. It currently has a $16 billion endowment. A generic goal of advancing human welfare. It was originally funded by $25,000, that's today about $500,000, gift from Edsel Ford. By 1947, after the death of its two founders, the foundation owned 90% of the non-voting shares of the Ford Motor Company. Okay? So getting back to our graph here, if this was the Ford Foundation, if this was Ford Motor Company, 90% of its shares were held by the foundation. Think about that. 90% of the non-voting shares. Do you think the foundation has a self-interest in funding the things that help Ford Motor Company, the for-profit? What you quickly see in this space, in the study of Blobcraft, is that the purpose of a nonprofit is to add profits to a for-profit that a for-profit can't do by itself, or that it would be tax inefficient for it to do by itself, or it would be logistically too devious to pull off. Like, it would be too transparent. And so you need to launder it through a web of nonprofits who don't need to disclose things in order to do the kind of covert action, political influence, market influence, sociocultural influence to help the market for the for-profit entity. Soros Management Fund, Ford Motor Company, Carnegie Inc., Rockefeller Inc., the Rockefeller Foundation. Same story. And of course, the Ford Foundation became the constant partner of the CIA, as we even showed. I'll just show a quick receipt here. All right, so you guys see this? This is 1951. The Ford Foundation is only 15 years old. And this is a letter from the Assistant Director of Research at the CIA to the head of the CIA, titled Suggestions on Projects We Would Like to See the Ford Foundation Support. Privately financed projects can do certain kinds of studies of interest to the government better than government agencies, including on political and psychological studies around economic bribery programs like the Marshall Plan and later USAID, and later the Marshall Plan of the Mind, i.e. BBC Media Action. So the CIA told the Ford Foundation that what it wanted was the establishment of area institutes, area studies, African studies, Soviet studies, European studies, Latin American studies, for both training and research in the political, social, economic, and legal structure of regions of great importance to present United States policy, but not as yet extensively studied in universities. The prime example is the whole Far Eastern region, of which our knowledge is extremely limited. It is impossible to design programs, it's impossible to design intelligent programs of economic assistance, political reorientation, so political subversion and changing their internal politics, or psychological warfare, without knowing a great deal more than we know about the basic characteristics of such critical districts as Indonesia, Indochina, India, Pakistan, Iraq, etc. The combination of programs of interest, of intensive research by groups representing various social science disciplines could be enormously useful to the intelligence agencies of the government. So the CIA talks to the Ford Foundation to get the Ford Foundation to fund the things the CIA wants, in this case, at the universities. So if you were drawing this out, you would include another node here. You would have, for example, a nudge node as a university to help influence a target government. In this case, the target governments they identified were those in Indonesia, Indochina, India, Pakistan, Iraq, to do political reorientation. And you can bet that as part of the Ford Foundation's assistance, the identical twin of the CIA, known as the State Department, will lobby those target governments in India, in Indochina, in Iraq, in Pakistan, to buy or give favorable tariff treatment, or favorable trade agreements, or favorable labor regulations, or favorable export conditions or import conditions for the Ford Motor Company in return for the Ford Foundation funding the CIA's requests for their common nudge nodes, in this case, the universities. And here are some of the universities that same year, 1951, in the CIA files. It shows that the Ford Foundation was funding in conjunction on behalf of the CIA. These are all these Ford Foundation grants in this CIA document from 1951, not declassified until 1999, at the University of Chicago, Princeton University, University of Michigan, Columbia University, Duke University, Stanford University, Princeton University. Ford, Rockefeller. You can bet a lot of these are going to be oil companies with the Rockefeller Foundation grants. Rutgers, Yale, Harvard. Do you see what I'm getting at here? And it is with that as background that we can now turn to the primary subject tonight. The equivalent of the Ford Foundation to the Ford Motor Company, the equivalent of the Open Society Foundation to the Soros Management Fund, BBC Media Action, the foundation arm of BBC News. All right. You guys ready? You guys excited?
Every whisper, it's the worst. Emptied out by a single word. There is a hollow.
So I'm going to read now to start this off. Well, first, here's what Google says. Oh, fuck. Give me a sec. I have to have a moment. We're doing the full 4 hours tonight. All right. So if you go to Google and you just type in Marshall Plan of the Mind, BBC, it will tell you the Marshall Plan of the Mind, MPM, was a BBC initiative that operated in the 1990s to promote democratic values in post-communist Eastern Europe through media and training projects. It was an early version of the current BBC Media Action, the BBC's international charity, which, as we covered, USAID plus the State Department have given BBC Media Action $17 million in our money. $17 million. We are the second largest donor to BBC Media Action. We are the biggest donor other than the British government itself. This, the UK Foreign Office, that's the British version of the State Department, okay? This is the UK State Department. And the second biggest donor is USAID. But if you add it up, we may actually, USAID actually may be giving more to BBC Media Action than the British government itself. Why do I say that? Well, look at other major donors. Do you guys remember Counterpart International? Who looks like, for example, the number 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, number 8 or 9 biggest BBC funder? Do you guys remember Counterpart International? We covered it on last stream. Because Van Creedle, if you guys remember, let me pull this up. Sec. We looked it up. I actually did a little bit more research on it. Counterpart International. Went from there to the CIA's union arm, the Solidarity Center. And then ended up at USAID. But Counterpart International, if you look at its funding, I asked, is Counterpart International funded directly or indirectly by USAID? If so, how much over the past 10 years, provide all relevant grants and partnerships? ChatGPT said yes, Counterpart International is heavily underlined, funded by the USAID, both directly as a prime recipient of cooperative agreements and grants, and indirectly as a sub-grantee and consortium partner. So not only is USAID giving 2.6 million pounds a year as the number two, but USAID is funding the other entities that are funding BBC Media Action. In fact, so it maybe actually be more. If it's 2.6 directly from USAID, that's only 400,000 pounds less than the U.S. government itself. If the U.S. funds half of Counterpart International's budget, the U.S. government gives more to the BBC than the British government. Think about that. The majority of Counterpart's revenue is received through awards from agencies of the U.S. government in its own financial statements. So there it is. There it is. If the majority of Counterpart's funding comes from USAID or other U.S. government agencies, which we just confirmed, and the British government only gives 400,000 pounds more than USAID, and Counterpart has given 875,000 pounds, that means over half, over 472.5. Okay, so it's more. So this, more than half of this plus this is more than that. So BBC Media Action is a majority U.S. government-funded entity across the top 10 donors. The special relationship, indeed. The US-UK special relationship. Of course, the Marshall Plan was said to be an American thing. Crazy. All right, so let's get back to this. So this is again what Google says. It was an early version of the current BBC Media Action, the BBC's international charity, and used by both British government and external funding to support the creation of media content and training programs in new democracies. Function. The project aimed to build democratic institutions. We're back to our control nodes. 50 from DSJ 505. Mike, is USAID still active? Yes. It is badly wounded, but it is still live. It is in the hospital treating its wounds, but it is alive. And as we covered, for example, on our Venezuela streams, remember the 2 streams we did on Venezuela earlier this month? It will never be dead. My goal is not to kill. My goal is to reform. And I know that there's certain forces within the Trump government that will never be... You want it aligned with U.S. interests, if that makes sense. The problem is it was doing stuff that was patently anti-American. for example, working on international censorship laws to punish American speech and American social media companies if they didn't censor American speech. That was my main gripe with USAID. But in order to stop that, I had to talk about all the other fucked up shit USAID did and what its true function was, so that when I show you these receipts, you don't go, no way, that's impossible. USAID, our international philanthropy, they could never do something like that. That's why I've had to launch this whole campaign to break the halo. So that when you see them doing that, you're like, oh, that's consistent with all the other fuckery I've seen. It really is what you're showing me. Do you get it? So it was to help build up, again, back to this phrase, democratic institutions. That means pro-blob institutions in a country. Media, for example, is a democratic institution, but not if we start a media company. Only if our editorial line is in sync with the blobs. 40 from Linda W, PhD. Why has the BBC been receiving money from CI front USAID? One journalist wants answers. Well, I've been explaining that. But I'll check out the link. From October 2025. Oh yeah, declassified UK. Yeah, the State Department. Right. Yeah, we covered this. But you know the answer. Oh, this is a funny quote. Hold on a second. From JewishTelegraph.com. He moved to London in 1995, where he worked for the Associated Press, Live TV, AOL Online, Sky News. And he received his first taste of covertness when he landed a position as news editor for a section of the American State Department. As it later transpired, he was, in fact, working for the CIA. Oh, this is a great receipt. I am not embellishing this, Rafi laughed. It is absolutely true. I worked for the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, which is part of the equivalent of BBC monitoring. One day I was taken to the side and told, you may or may not know that we are a part of the CIA, but don't go telling people. And then he joined the BBC. That's what this whole apparatus is, okay? The Marshall Plan was a CIA program. Don't you get it? (1948) inauguration of organized political warfare. The founding CIA document, effectively. On the eve of its plausible deniability doctrine grant. Okay. Okay, the inauguration of organized political warfare by George Kennan, which was one of these seminal documents around organizing the Central Intelligence Agency for covert political warfare. Covert, including white and black propaganda, black psychological warfare, white propaganda like BBC Media Action. But part of that was economic measures such as ERP. ERP was the Marshall Plan. That was the European Recovery Plan, right? ERP Marshall Plan. That was the name for the Marshall Plan. European Recovery Program. So this is explicitly saying the purpose of the Marshall Plan was CIA covert action to use that money to influence the development of government, legal, market structures. Sorry. Do you see what I'm saying? Right here, in the inauguration of organized political warfare, the seminal document 2 months before the CIA got its plausible deniability license to use the CIA for covert political warfare was not just white propaganda like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Allied in the BBC, or black psychological warfare, but also to have the CIA engage in covert influence through economic measures such as the Marshall Plan. So that the Marshall Plan, again, ERP, European Recovery Program, is the Marshall Plan. It was an instrument of a covert, organized political warfare apparatus so that governments getting that money there'd be strings attached to the money. They would develop in a way that they would buy American products. They would have American favored trade and tariff arrangements, import-export arrangements. They would allow American foundations and NGOs to serve as the political control nodes in all these countries. So it's with that in mind that it's useful to understand that the Marshall Plan of the mind, when you understand the Marshall Plan was a CIA covert action program, literally. It was a both overt and covert political influence program. So too is the Marshall Plan of the mind. No connection to martial law. Martial law is MARTIAL. Okay. Now, I asked ChatGPT to write me a detailed essay on everything you can find about the BBC's Marshall Plan of the Mind, covering who was behind it and why, what the thought process was, what they hoped to achieve, and how that ultimately turned into BBC Media Action, the majority U.S. government funded funder of all the spawn media that creates your surround sound every day in the news. So I'm going to read now what essay was produced, and we'll annotate it. Okay? After this drop. Okay. The BBC's Marshall Plan of the Mind was a short-lived brand, but a hugely important bridge between Cold War broadcasting, post-1989 transition ideology, and what later became BBC Media Action. Okay, because you have to understand, all these countries had newly become nominally pro-US. Give you an example. Let me pull this up. So, for example, Poland threw off the yoke of the Soviet Union in 1989. So did Slovakia, but Slovakia was separated formally from Czechoslovakia in 1993, but it's also 1989, I believe. Romania, 1989. Bulgaria, 1989. Estonia, 1991. Okay, all these countries, the goal was no longer full regime change. The goal was to get the pro-US-UK governments to become even more pro-US-UK, to do more of what the US and UK governments and outside financiers wanted them to do. All right, that's what this post-transition references here. When it says post-transition, because again, they wanted to transition, just like we talked about USAID's OTI, Office of Transition Initiatives. That means overthrow, regime change. So the goal was no longer to overthrow Poland's government. That had already been done 2 years earlier. Goal wasn't to overthrow Hungary, Bulgaria, Estonia, Czechoslovakia's government. It was to manage those new governments to make them more fully vassal states. It started as a Margaret Thatcher-era development cum propaganda project for the former Soviet bloc. So once again, what today is going against right-wing populism, BBC Media Action, as we'll see, is completely devoted to stopping right-wing populism, started as a way to stop the remnants of left-wing communism in the former Soviet bloc. Once again, the anti-communism to anti-populism switcheroo of national security state covert influence nodes. And it evolved via institutional rebranding and expansion in the BBC's Global Media for Development NGO. Below is a stitched-together narrative of what we can reconstruct from parliamentary records, charity filings, academic work, BBC aid documentation, and a few critical commentaries. What was the Marshall Plan of the Mind? The name deliberately echoes the original Marshall Plan, but instead of rebuilding physical infrastructure, this was billed as a Marshall Plan for ideas and attitudes. Just like the physical infrastructure that CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency of the Department of Homeland Security, So this is Chuck Grassley's oversight. While speaking at a conference in 2021, he's saying to Jen Easterly, the head of CISA after Chris Krebs, you discussed your plans to strengthen CISA's misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation team, and stated one could argue we're in the business of critical infrastructure. And the most important critical infrastructure is our cognitive infrastructure. And that resilience to misinformation and disinformation is incredibly important. And then I love this footnote. Insiders worry CISA is too distracted from its critical cyber mission because they're so focused on controlling opinions on the internet. This is the same switcheroo from physical infrastructure to cognitive infrastructure that was done at CISA between 2018 and 2021, and that destroyed the 2020 election, completely destroyed it. This is exactly what happened from the transition from the Marshall Plan to the Marshall Plan of the mind. A Marshall Plan for ideas and attitudes. And I have pulled up here a actual UK Parliament 1994 debate over the Marshall Plan of the mind from 1994. In the early 1990s, the UK Foreign Office, that's the UK State Department, so MI6 runs through the UK Foreign Office for covert activity. The funding of the NGO apparatus from the British government runs to the UK Foreign Office, and so does their formal diplomatic channels. So the British version of the State Department in the early 1990s created the Know-How Fund, a Margaret Thatcher era aid instrument for Central and Eastern Europe, Eurasia, to seek novel ways to push former communist societies towards free market capitalism and liberal democracy. So again, this is so that Wall Street and London banks and multinational companies could capture the market. Okay, this is not just because we love capitalism for capitalism's sake. It's because you now have 1 billion people who are now eligible to buy American and British products. You have profitable loans that can be given out. You have commercial banking that can expand. Let's pull up a little picture. You see all this in the red? These are all markets. Markets, Buzz. Markets as far as the eye can see. Are you a plastics company? Well, here are brand new markets for your business, as far as the eye can see. Are you Pizza Hut? Here are brand new Pizza Hut customers, as far as the eye can see. Sec here.
Это Горбачев.
Горбачев.
Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Да благодаря ему.
Because of him, we have economic confusion. Because USAID paid $350 million to Larry Summers and Jeffrey Sachs at the Harvard Institute for International Development to take over the Russian economy. Because of him, we have economic confusion. The other one says, because of him, we have opportunity.
Новые возможности.
Это из-за него у нас политическая
Because of him, we have political instability, like Boris Yeltsin firing rockets at his own parliament, who was opposing him selling off all of the iron and coal and steel and oil to Western profiteers. I say this lovingly as a Western profiteer, so to speak, but this was done dirty. There's a way to profiteer honestly, and there's where you both make money, and you know, there's a fair market deal and there's theft. And what was done in Russia in the 1990s was theft. Because of him, we have political instability.
Да благодаря ему у нас
Because of him, we have
свобода.
freedom.
Полный хаос.
Complete chaos, hope,
Перспективы.
Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря
political
ему.
instability. And then finally, the wise old grandmother says, while the kid is enjoying his Pizza Hut, because of him, we have many things,
У нас есть Pizza Hut.
like Pizza Hut. Yep. Even the critic is won over. Yeah, you're right. Because of him, we have Pizza Hut.
За Горбачева.
За Горбачева.
Even the critic is won over.
За Горбачева. За Горбачева.
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a
So when you see all of this free market, pushing free market capitalism, that is, just think of the Pizza Hut ad. That is every company. Are you a Walmart? Thanks to Gorbachev, we have a Walmart. Are you a Shell gas station? Are you a Starbucks? Are you a Zara or a Victoria's Secret or a McDonald's? You will find all of these companies are major co-partners of USAID, as USAID is pushing the so-called free market capitalism. But that ain't what it's about. They're pushing markets for their corporate partners. This is not just capitalism for capitalism's sake. They would have no problem if it was like a Soviet-style dictatorship, but it was their partnered Western companies who were the, government-mandated products. Okay? One of the reasons that you see this push against free market capitalism today is because many of these big industries that are these giant emerging ones like climate, net zero energy solutions don't work under free market capitalism. They get outcompeted by oil companies and the low cost of coal. So they will tactically embrace communist-style government mandates and cartels and hand-picked market players for mandatory market quotas. Do you see what I'm talking about here? So don't, we all love free market capitalism here, I think. At least we have a lot of love for it as opposed to Soviet-style communism. But do not be fooled by this. You will see, for example, corporate donors to BBC Media Action and you will see, for example, the Open Society Foundation, the Spawn Army sidekick of the Soros Management Fund, funding BBC Media Action to push the, quote, free market reforms that help all of the portfolio companies of the Soros Management Fund. You get it? Let's keep going. So the British version of the State Department creates this thing called the Know-How Fund to educate people in the newly blue countries that were formerly behind the Iron Curtain, all these companies. So this is this government funding people in here to teach them how to sell off their state-held assets to London banks. That's the know-how. It was explicitly designed as teaching capitalism to communists. And mass media, radio, TV, was chosen as a vehicle. One academic, I believe, Mandel. Let's see who Mandel is. Mandel. Ruth Mandel. Marshall Plan of the Mind, the political economy of a Kazakh soap opera. I'll just send this to you guys if you want to see. So Ruth Mandel describes the Marshall Plan of the Mind as created in November 1992 as a collaboration between the BBC and the Know-How Fund. When was the BBC actually started? 1922. Okay. So right after World War I ends, the BBC is created. Okay, makes sense. It probably aggregated all of the World War I propaganda outlets into a giant network. A British Council distance education report from the mid-1990s describes BBC quadruple programs in Russia under the general title of the Marshall Plan of the Mind, supported by the Office of Development Assistance through the Know-How Fund, with the aim of conditioning the Russian public to develop a business sense and an awareness of the implication and operations of a free market society. So it's conditioning them to accept Pizza Hut and to maybe give favorable tax treatment and labor law reforms, and not wanting to nationalize British or American companies operating in Russia. Because remember, at this time, we love Russia in 1993, 1992, because Boris Yeltsin, our puppet, is in charge. And again, I come back to our funny Austin Powers Russia scene. Austin Powers Russia scene. Now let's see. When Austin Powers? When did that come out? What year? Was it 95? $1997. Yes, because remember, from 1991 until 1998, 1999, we loved Russia, because it was Yeltsin. 1997, we had just rigged the 1996 election to ensure that Yeltsin continued. And again, you can watch something like Spinning Boris about this is a great movie about how we rigged the 1996 election for Boris Yeltsin. So this is 1997. We still love Russia. So just think of like this scene when you think about what was happening during the Marshall Plan of the Mind and the construction of what is today BBC Media Action.
This is Commander Gilmore, U.S.
So Austin Powers had just been cryogenically unfrozen. He was frozen in the 1960s. He now gets unfrozen in 1997. In the 1960s, the Brits and the U.S. were at the height of the Cold War against the Russians. So now he's getting unfrozen.
This is Commander Gilmore, U.S. Strategic Command, and General Borshevsky, Russian Intelligence.
Russian intelligence? Are you mad?
A lot's happened since you were frozen. The Cold War's over.
Well, finally those capitalist pigs will pay for their crimes, eh? Hey, comrades, eh?
Austin, we won.
Oh, groovy, smashing. Yay, capitalism.
So it was not uncommon in a British intelligence lab to have both your U.S.
Russian intelligence, Gilmore, U.S. Strategic Command, and
U.S. Strategic Command
General Bolshevsky, Russian intelligence.
and Russian intelligence working together with the Brits because it was a puppet government of the Americans and Brits from 1991 to 1999. So that was this period. So when you see BBC quadrupling its programming inside of Russia in the mid-1990s, that was because they were our new puppet government, and we were conditioning their elites, their intellectuals, their working class to do what we wanted their puppet government to do. You get it? From the BBC's own side, a 1999 memorandum of the House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee is very blunt. The Marshall Plan of the Mind was launched in 1992 to make programs for radio and TV stations in Russia on such subjects as setting up small businesses, explaining market economics and the theory behind it. It also produced a soap opera about Russians learning to cope with the new circumstances. In short, the Marshall Plan of the Mind was a BBC-branded education propaganda project centering on using drama and factual programming to push free market and civil society norms into post-Soviet societies. Civil society, again, means covert influence, political influence. Trust your local civil society organization. What are the civil society organizations? These are all of the spawn army nodes. We're not the government. We're just an independent, nonprofit civil society organization, nudging you to make the market reforms and governance reforms that will help the donor drafter class make more money off of you. Who was behind it? Institutional sponsors. From the surviving records, there's a tight cluster of institutions behind it. The BBC World Service, the Operational Home and Brand, the UK Foreign Office, the political sponsor, that's the UK State Department, and its know-how fund, the Overseas Development Administration, its development arm, that was their version of USAID. And oh, looky here, who else do we have? The Soros Open Society Institute. And who else? The Ford Foundation. Through the Friends of the BBC Marshall Plan Mind Trust. So let's now go back to, let's just play this quote to understand. A sec. As the Soviet Empire collapsed, I moved in to pick up the pieces. So this is how the Soros Empire is replacing the Soviet Empire.
When the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire collapsed, and as the empire collapsed, I moved in and picked up the pieces. First in Hungary in 1984, and then Poland in 87, China in 87 as well. So this is how the Soros Empire was replacing the Soviet Empire.
So as the Soros Empire, the Soros Management Fund, is investing in all of these new markets in Poland, in Hungary, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Estonia, in Russia. The Open Society Foundation is funding all of the little nudge units to nudge those target governments to make the market reforms that profit the investments of the Soros Management Fund. One of those nudge institutions on the Soros Management Fund map is BBC Media Action, which itself will fund all of the spawns to influence on the media side those target governments. So let me just, while we're here, I'm going to run another analysis. Aggregate, estimate if need be, the total amount of investments made by all of George Soros's aggregated private investment funds across all of the formerly Soviet satellite states in Europe, as well as in Russia itself, between 1990 and 2000. We'll just keep it clean for this decade. I want the total amount of Soros investments by country and the total amount adding all the countries together for those 10 years. All right. We'll let that run. It might take a little bit. And this also places Soros directly, not just nudging the investments. So they're doing these free market reforms as Soros is investing in it so that his own market returns will be better. But this also places Soros directly. In this case, you would have, let's just call it, let's just put these together. And what you'll see here, boom and boom. Shoot. There you go. Here, this will be the UK Foreign Office / MI6. Okay? So the same relationship that we see on the CIA side, Soros will now, because he is now funding BBC Media Action, that now puts him in direct communication, effectively, with both the overt and covert side of British statecraft. So when the diplomat from the UK Foreign Office walks over to the government of Poland and says, hey, we want you to make these free market reforms in your telecommunications infrastructure. We want in Hungary, we want you to make, or in Romania, we want you to make these free market reforms to your petroleum ecosystem and to let Chevron in. And the Soros Management Fund is invested in Chevron. In fact, I believe Soros even talks about the Chevron story in his, which book was it? 1991, I think Soros wrote this book, Underwriting Democracy, Encouraging Free Enterprise and Democratic Reform Among the Soviets in Eastern Europe. This was his book. By George Soros. This is the same thing BBC Media Action was doing. Free enterprise means opening it up for George Soros to invest in, the Soros Management Fund, his hedge funds. And democratic reform means turning over the government to control by NGO so that the government will tilt the market in favor of the Soros Management Fund. Okay. All right, let's get back to this. So, and the Ford Foundation, of course, as we covered, was working directly with the CIA, as we showed here and here. The CIA and the Ford Foundation. Question. Given that in 1951, the head of the CIA was being informed about what the rank and file CIA were doing, suggestions on kinds of projects we would like to see the Ford Foundation support, do you think in 1992, at the end of the Cold War, the British government said to their U.S. partners, hey, we want to influence all of these newly pro-Western governments to let American Chamber of Commerce and British companies have them dominate the markets there. We'd love to have American support. Do you think the CIA had another memo in 1992 instead of 1951, where the assistant director for CIA research wrote to the director of Central Intelligence another memo called Suggestions on Kinds of Projects We Would Like to See the Ford Foundation Support? And they may have proposed, hey, we should talk to the Ford Foundation about sponsoring BBC Media Action. At the time, the Marshall Plan of the Mind. Rather than having the CIA fund it directly, as the CIA started to get out of the business of doing direct financial support after the 1970s disasters with the Church Committee. Is it possible that the Ford Foundation made, that there was a favors for favors relationship in terms of if it donated to all of these research universities when the CIA asked it to, so that it wouldn't look like the universities were all getting direct CIA funding, they'd get it from the Ford Foundation instead, and the CIA was paying the Ford Foundation. In this case, you might see USAID grants or sub-grants. All I'm saying is these things are never what they seem. When you see Ford Foundation, do not automatically think that this is like some philanthropic, charitable thing, when you have this incredible history behind these contributions for very similar things in the past. All right, so let's get back to it. I'll turn our music back on. Okay, so this is another thing that I think is really funny. Actually, let me move this over. So here's another reason that I am skeptical that the Marshall Plan of the Mind being funded by the Ford Foundation through its Friends of the BBC Marshall Plan of the Mind Trust was just a philanthropic foundation grant. You guys ready for this? Let me open up a new tab here. I'm going to play this music, and then I'm going to present to you a way to think about this.
And when the lights come down, I wanna feel you standing next to me. And can you hear me out? There's a lifetime in front of me. When my time runs out, time will come. Ever since I first looked in your eyes, I said you're the one. Oh my God, oh my God, tell me I'm the one. Oh my God, oh my God. I wanna feel you standing there. Late on the evening when the sun comes down, under the starlight as the birds fly by, I see the dust fill the twilight sky. I feel the warmth of your hand in mine. It's in the air, it's in the air, it's in the air we breathe. It's all around, it's all around.
So you'll see that the Ford Foundation which had been working with the CIA for at least 30 years during the Cold War, as we covered, made its grants through a trust called the Friends of the BBC Marshall Plan Trust. Now, this was a very common technique for the CIA to move money through nominally independent philanthropies. For example, the CIA in 1951, as we covered exactly when the Ford Foundation was working with the CIA to fund other projects the CIA wanted. 1951, Ford Foundation grants from the CIA. 1951, this one as well. It was the CIA moved the money through a, quote, ostensibly private group called the Friends, American Friends of the Middle East. Friends of. But not just the American Friends of the Middle East. Here is a State Department cable I found called CIA Funding of Student and Other Organizations, where they list Friends, the American Friends of the Middle East, Friends of, as a CIA front, funded directly or indirectly by CIA funds, as well as the Friends of India Committee Trust. So again, the Friends of Trust. What was the vehicle through which the Ford Foundation made the grants to the Marshall Plan of the Mind, BBC Media Action? It was the Friends of the BBC Marshall Plan Trust. Literally, the same way the CIA was moving money through the Friends of India Committee Trust. A philanthropy. Friends of Trust. Here's another one. This is a CIA document on aid to Democrat Greece committees. This is a great document. The various committees for aid to Democrat Greece. These organizations are purportedly concerned only with the provision of relief, such as food, clothing, and medical supplies, to the Greek rebels. Although it is clear that their main significance lies in the conventional fields of propaganda, and it is possible that such clandestine objectives, such as the recruitment of volunteers and the channeling of funds in arms, are also involved. So here is the CIA in this document outlining dozens of aid organizations that it's funding. And they say, nominally, purportedly, we say that this is food relief, medical relief, USAID food relief programs, like Bono. Oh, how does 95 million out of 100 million from Band-Aid and Live Aid go to funding CIA-backed rebel groups and buying them weapons? Gee, do you think it's the same thing it's always been? Our assets are purportedly only concerned with providing food, clothing, and medical supplies. But it is clear their main significance lies in propaganda and our clandestine objectives of running money and weapons. Is this not the most USAID shit you've ever seen in your life? This paragraph? But this was in the early 1950s, before USAID existed. And it was done directly by CIA. And then it's starting in 1961, it was done by USAID, the CIA front. You get it? And when I was looking at this document and highlighting it, what did I find? One of the CIA-backed entities was called Friends of Democrat Greece Society. The same way BBC Media Action had its Ford Foundation funds come in through the Friends of. You dig? So you have Soros working with the CIA, the Ford Foundation working with the CIA, and then basically the British government to pry open these new governments so that they never had a chance to develop on their own. Key individuals: Sir John Tusa, director of the BBC World Service. He was the chairman of the BBC Marshall Plan of the Mind as an educational charitable trust, calling it the most significant project dedicated to mass knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer? Is that what we're calling it? This is brainwashing. Kerry Blackburn was editor, expanding the funding. More broadly, BBC World Service drama producers, trainers, and consultants were heavily involved, including soap opera specialists, to produce TV soap operas in Russia and Romania. I would love to see some of those. Let's watch some Russian and Romanian soap operas produced by the Marshall Plan of the Mind with Soros and Ford Foundation funding. Designed to help Warsaw Pact countries move from command economies to free market systems. I'm just gonna, okay. A British Council seminar paper places the Marshall Plan of the Mind in a historical line that runs from early BBC English broadcasts and the agricultural soap The Archers to new distance education projects. They're aimed at conditioning the public to welcome Soros portfolio companies. Parliamentarians were very well aware of the ideological thrust. In one 1994 comments exchange, one member of parliament denounced the Marshall Plan of the Mind as crude capitalist propaganda being pumped into the Russian media with know-how fund money. The minister answered that the real purpose was to help Russians make progress economically. Let us in. Open your butthole. So here's what they said. Conventional technical assistance projects only reach elites. Broadcast media can reach tens of millions. Telling people what to do can be dull, so wrap it in entertainment, especially long-running soaps modeled on the Archers and EastEnders. Wrap it in entertainment. Brainwashing can be really dull if you're just telling people what to do. So storyify it, make it entertaining. Tell an entertaining allegory about two people in a rundown Soviet bloc apartment coming to grips with these new economic opportunities from Soros investment fund portfolio companies. Justified as both development aid and public diplomacy soft power. So what do? Rush a radio series of Moscow-based soap operas from the BBC's own evidence department. So Radio Russia gave national reach to the propaganda through its ubiquitously wired Radio Tocha system. The flagship drama was a soap opera set in a Moscow apartment building, following characters struggling to adapt to post-Soviet life and economic change. It's literally the fucking same thing as... It's the same thing as the Pizza Hut ad. Go back to that Pizza Hut ad. It's following these characters struggling to adapt to post-Soviet economy and getting them to have nothing and enjoy it. You'll have nothing and be happy. As Wall Street and London were gobbling up all these countries' trillions of dollars collectively in publicly held wealth, so that they privately owned the steel, the agriculture, the petroleum, the gold, the copper, and the people were not getting richer despite transitioning to a capitalist economy. They blanketed the media. The flagship drama was a soap opera set in a Moscow apartment building following characters struggling to adapt, just like you. These characters are struggling. But look at how they see it.
Это Горбачев. Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Because of him, we have economic confusion. Don't you feel that way, you fellow Moscow apartment building dweller struggling to adapt? You see you're not getting any richer despite all this Western investment in the country. And you no longer co-own your own steel mills as part of your own government. Your own petroleum as part of your own government. Now, Exxon and British Petroleum own it. Well, we have nothing. We have nothing. These people have nothing, just like you, in our propaganda outlets. But look, we have opportunity. Don't you see it? Yeah, you're not experiencing any of the opportunity, but don't you see it? And political instability. Yeah, but look, we're free to talk about the political instability that we have. Isn't that good? And at the end, the characters in the soap opera will inevitably say, hail to Jeffrey Sachs, hail to Larry Summers, hail to USAID, despite us still living in these crappy conditions and life expectancy going down a decade, losing a decade of your life on average for the transition to this vassal state government. That is what this will do. Let's check it out. What was this actual? Can we watch this? The radio soap was called Podyedz Shatira, Apartment 7, Entrance 4, based explicitly on the Archers format. It was immensely popular and served as a template for later projects. Can we see this? I wonder if there's I wonder if we can find this. But again, when you see BBC media action going after Trump now, and going after the Brexit movement, and going after the Polish PIS party or the German AfD party, it's the same friggin' thing. They just went from going against left-wing communism, i.e. left-wing nationalism, to right-wing populism, i.e. right-wing nationalism. It was just international finance and donor drafter class people going against any nationalist opposition from the left or the right. I wonder if we can find this anywhere. I want to see how crude this was. Huh. Market behavior. The political economy of a Kazakh soap opera is the most granular case study. A TV serial called Crossroads in Kazakhstan was developed as an elaboration of the earlier Russian radio soap. Its explicit brief was to teach economic literacy, just like media literacy, privatization, banking, and market reforms. Is that not the most Soros shit you've ever seen? You will have nothing and be happy. We will teach you about the wonders of us robbing your state-held wealth and privatizing it for us while you're left with nothing. But aren't you happy that you're free to complain about the nothing that you have? By weaving together these storylines into two intertwined Kazakh and Russian families running small private enterprises. Of course, the project was pitched as development aid, but it also included corporate product placement, British American tobacco brands, Wrigley's Gum, Smirnoff Vodka, all appeared as a deliberate strategy of technology and attracting private sector matching fund. So literally, British American tobacco brands, Wrigley Gum, our vodka, we had corporate sponsorship so that when we were running these ads, you know, the Pizza Hut, these soap operas, they'd be smoking, you know, Camel, Joe, Camel, whatever. They'd be chewing Wrigley's gum. Do you think, did tobacco brands ever fund the Ford Foundation? Or did like the Soros Investment Fund in the 1990s, did it invest in Wrigley's Gum or Smirnoff Vodka or British American tobacco funds? Like, while they were getting this free advertising to tens of millions of Soviets? That would be so funny. I'm curious. It'd be a hard thing to... I'm curious if ChatGPT will find it. All right, let's keep going on our thing here in the meantime. That's so funny. Isn't that? But this is exactly what I'm saying. They say it's you know, free market. But you have these specific corporations who are getting sponsored content placement. They don't care about a free market. They want their own personal profits. That's so funny. A Know How Fund official candidly admitted the assistance carried unashamedly political objectives to support the changes we wanted, where it'd be better for them and for us, for politics and trade. There's no such thing as aid in USAID. Do you understand when we get back to why it is that USAID is funding the BBC media charity? Again, it's to control the politics and to control the trade. They literally say it point blank. The purpose is not to help them learn about markets. It's so that we get better trade and better control over their internal politics. What did I start this out with drawing for you guys as? the way it worked. You have, just like we had here, target government. It's for more profitable markets, trade, and to control the target government. The two purposes. Same thing on this side. Literally just copy the target government right here. It's just the same thing right here. Okay? Boom. All these spawns. And then these spawns hit the target government. Do you see what I'm saying? I probably made those too big. I should make those thinner lines. Let's bring it back down to like 20. Okay. So all of these spawns are going to influence the target government. So there are two beneficiaries. Both the corporations, the funds, and the companies, and the government to be able to control. So you're both taking over the market and the target government. Does that make sense? They literally say it explicitly. Good example is the Overseas Development Institute, which lists both British American Tobacco and the Ford Foundation as donors and subscribers. Okay. That's so funny. Remember, and that was the British version, the Overseas Development Agency, right? British ODI is what administered the Know-How Fund. And the Ford Foundation was and again, the Ford Foundation is going to have these, just like they own 90% of the non-voting stock of the Ford Motor Company. Curious what the endowment, serves on the donor drafter class side. But all right, but do you understand what I'm saying? Is this useful to understand? Again, it's both the target, the politics, and the markets, which are related. You can justify, in the name of British national interest or American national interest, to crack open the agencies and the muscle from the agencies. And then those diplomats will get board seats on the British American tobacco companies. They'll get board seats on Wrigley's gum. They'll become a strategic, a macro opportunity strategic advisor for some alternate asset fund managed by a Goldman Sachs co-investor with the Soros Management Fund when their day is done on the diplomacy track. So all this stuff. A BBC media school was set up with capital equipment from the Soros Foundation to train TV and radio journalists from across Russia in production and editorial practice. Oh, great. So in the 1990s, the editorial desks for Russian media were being trained effectively by the Soros Foundation. The Soros Foundation equipment and from the Soros Foundation funded BBC Media School. Let's see what our report turned back. That's weird. It's not pulling up. Let's see what this pulled up in terms of the investments, right? The Soros Management Fund aggregating the quantum funds and the Soros family office, made $3 to $5 billion worth of investments between 1990 and 2000. Convert 3 to 5 billion. Convert, let's just call it 5 billion. Convert $5 billion in 1995 money to its equivalent today. So that's 10.6 billion. Let's call it 10 billion. Those were the private investments, the market investments that the Soros Management Fund made in Iron Curtain countries. Again, we'll go picture of the Iron Curtain. So all of this free enterprise investment all of these countries, $10 billion worth of Soros Management Fund investments in all of these markets, $10 billion. So to ensure these $10 billion return more than $10 billion worth of revenue, the Open Society Foundation funds all of these influence nodes, all of these spawn media assets, partnering with the British government, probably with the CIA through the Ford Foundation, to fund things like the BBC Media Action to target the governments to ensure that the market conditions are profitable for the Soros Management Fund, for all of its little investments in all these countries. $10 billion worth. Through the Soros Quantum Fund, Quasar Fund, Quantum Industrial Holdings, Quantum Emerging Growth. In August 1997, Soros published an essay titled My Investments in Russia, including $2.5 billion in the Svenas Invest deal alone. These are investments. These are not grants. This is not open society charitable giving, okay? That's money out. The investments are for money into the Soros empire. And this is a donor-drafter class relationship. The Soros Management Fund contributes to the Open Society Foundation to be a donor of BBC Media Action to influence target governments to make market reforms to profit the Soros Management Fund. And the billions that Soros Inc. makes off of that is the classic donor-drafter class relationship. Donates to these government initiatives to draft off of their work influencing target governments by profiting from his own personal hedge fund. You wonder why Soros hates Russia so much? Because this deal that, according to ChatGPT, he invested between $1 and $2.5 billion in, that was Russia's state-held telecom company, privatized in the 1990s, sold off 49% of it. George Soros said that $1 billion he invested was the worst investment he ever made. He's pissed at Russia for not making more money for him. That's why we need to take over Eurasia. Isn't that crazy? Look at that. Wow. So according to ChatGPT, $2.5 billion investment. I'm sorry, $900 million he invested in Swinvest in 1997. And then he had to sell it for a loss. In 2004, he sold the stake for $650 million. So he lost $300 million on this trade. Now, of course, this is in 2004, right when you saw the rise of Garry Kasparov, because Russia was cracking down on Khodorkovsky. If you remember from from a king to a pawn stream on Garry Kasparov. 2004 was right when Putin pulled the rug out from Western investments by cracking down on Khodorkovsky and the Yukos oil deal. So Soros probably saw that and panicked because he thought his investments were going to be next. So probably sold it off for a loss at a fire sale price because he saw what happened to Khodorkovsky and thought that was what was going to happen to himself. And that's when he started backing Garry Kasparov and all these Russia is bad now. That was also when we started the climate change bullshit to try to break Putin and the fossil fuel economy. I bet you that's also when the Soros Management Fund began getting involved in climate finance. So, in 2011, the Marshall Plan of the Mind rebrands as BBC Media Action. Because the Marshall Plan is not big enough. The Marshall Plan is just for Europe, right? Think bigger. Think the world. Having the same relationship everywhere in the world, including, as we should turn to now, Bangladesh. Building up capacity building. Capacity building. Our own little puppet media stations. Market making to make markets for Western brands. I didn't even read this, guys, to make markets for Western brands. I didn't even read this before I created this for you guys. To make markets for Western brands. The portfolio companies of Soros Management Fund or Bill Browder's funds or you name it. Pizza Hut, Walmart, Wrigley's Gum, the British American Tobacco, American vodka to sell to the Russians. Hundreds of local media folks wrapped up in this. All right, so with that in mind, let's pull up the youth rise. So, I talked a lot late last year about the Biden government's coup, their color revolution to overthrow the democratically elected government of Bangladesh. Talked about Joe Rogan, talked about Tucker Carlson, talked about a lot. I learned it from Max Blumenthal's Gray Zone leaked documents. So credit to them for getting the source documents that made my kind of commentary and sort of continued mining possible. But when I was looking into USAID funding for BBC Media Action, I found, as I talked about last stream, a $4 million grant from USAID to BBC Media Action, the Marshall Plan of the Mind, a 4-year grant from 2021 to 2025. The government of Bangladesh was overthrown in, I believe, October 2024, so this worked. And what was it for? The Youth Rise People to People Activity Award. So let's look at BBC Media Action Youth Rise program. I believe this was Bangladesh specific. Youth are resilient, interconnected, socially cohesive, and engaged. Youth Rise. This is the USAID program to mobilize young people to take to the streets. And that was what happened. The youth did rise and overthrow the Bangladesh government. We'll watch a documentary on that in a second. So let me pause. Actually, let's start with these receipts. Okay. Now, the IRI did take issue with this and said these documents obtained by the Gray Zone had errors in them. Some of them were doctored. We didn't use the word destabilize, they said, according to like some CIA-funded, NED-funded like researcher. But they did concede that these were broadly accurate. But they said we didn't use the word destabilize. Really? But so let me open these up, and we're going to go through these to show what was done. This is in IRI, so the Republican wing of the CIA's baseline assessment submitted to the State Department, who funds them. So as we covered, they funded these 2 rap songs. We watched these music videos last week. They funded Tawfiq Ahmed's You Can Do It rap song and produced his music video to strengthen democracy in Bangladesh in every possible way, including protests and street movements. So funding rappers, Bangladeshi hip-hop artists, funding rappers and Bangladeshi hip-hop artists to tell the youth to rise up and take to the streets in protest movements. Highly consistent with, where's the... The youth are socially cohesive and engaged, politically engaged. Oh, God. All right. The second rap song they produced that we watched last week was E Dae Ka'ar by Tawfiq Ahmed. They produced the music video and said the song's lyrics were designed to build up disappointment and even dissent to government. So this is a CIA cutout, literally created by the CIA, called for by the CIA director for this thing to be set up in 1982-83. Its 2 founding directors both acknowledged that they do what the CIA wants to do, but gets in trouble for doing, so it's better to do through an NGO. And they are funding rap songs in Bangladesh to get youth people to take to the streets in protest and to hate their own government, to build up disappointment and dissent to their own government. I mean, imagine the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs gets busted funding, friggin' Kendrick Lamar to write songs against the Biden government. Like, imagine like friggin', Tekashi 6ix9ine had his music videos produced by the Russian government secretly through a philanthropic foundation front. We'd have like a genuine Russiagate scandal on our hands. In addition, the CIA, through the National Endowment for Democracy, funded the entire arts and culture scene within Bangladesh. Rappers, book writers, photographers, painters, theater groups, dance groups, filmmakers. 225 media products, 30 paintings, a book, 2 music videos, including the Essence of Soul transgender women dance group performance. We got 2,265 people in person to these exhibits, 80,000 households, 313,000 views for IRI-funded art products, CIA-funded government-critical art products, to raise awareness on key political issues. To get people to call for political changes in Bangladesh. Political. By supporting Bangladeshi hip-hop. USAID was in on the game, just like USAID, as we saw right here, funding BBC Media Action on the ground in Bangladesh to get the youth to rise up. USAID was also funding IRI, the CIA's RNC branch. USAID, IRI is currently implementing a USAID program focused on countering violent extremism, right? Probably just painting the government as being violent extremists. and previously had funding from 2013 to 2016 through SEPS, as we covered. The Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening, to control the political process of a foreign country and our own country, because SEPS did the international censorship law roadshow, contorted the internal politics of Brazil to build up Brazil's censorship court, focused on political party strengthening. Political party strengthening. Which political party do you think they were strengthening? The one in power they were trying to remove, or the opposition parties? Imagine if Russia had a FSB created foundation, a Russian intelligence created foundation that specifically engaged in strengthening political parties here in the US. We'd call that Russian fucking interference, wouldn't we? And election support. USAID Bangladesh has indicated several broad priorities in its country development strategy through formal and informal communications with IRI staff. First is to support Bangladeshi political parties. That's number one. USAID's political party programs are currently implemented by Democracy International, but the award is expected to be recompeted in 2022, which IRI will position itself for through continued political party work through its NED programs. So this is just USAID backing specific political parties in countries all over the world. And as we saw in last stream, USAID is definitely backing one political party here at home. At least until the Republicans get back in a Coke and Pepsi formation with a Nikki Haley type. Second is youth empowerment. So number one is strengthening the opposition political party, so we can get rid of this fucking government and put a puppet in, as they did with this World Bank guy, Yunus. The second is youth empowerment, both in terms of participation and representation. So get the young people. And as we'll see, this was a Gen Z color revolution. USAID has released several solicitations, which IRS chose not to pursue, but will likely release new funding opportunities in the future. We'll continue to update USAID staff on progress. The list here is our primary contacts as of June 2021. State DRL, that's Democracy, Rights, and Labor, as I mentioned, the worst part of the State Department. Our USAID contacts. Our U.S. Embassy contacts. And our Hill outreach. Chris Murphy, Trump hater extraordinaire. Chris Murphy was on the ground in Ukraine during the 2014 coup, making love to John McCain the whole time. Strategic U.S. admin outreach to all these different State Department folks. And even doing things like mis and disinformation workshops. In Bangladesh, USAID workshop trains reporters on countering misinformation, setting up a little censorship state, just as SEPS was doing in Brazil to stop the Trump of the tropics, just as SEPS is doing all over the world. And IRI and SEPS work hand in hand, so does NDI, all of NED. The U.S. Embassy in Bangladesh, USAID workshop trains local reporters on countering misinformation. And as you'll see here, the training featured guest presenters, including former Bangladesh ambassador and foreign secretary, the head of their version of the State Department, Tahoud Hussein, who I believe came back into the government post-coup. So they're working with the opposition, political opposition, to censor members of the in-power government, the same way they did in the 2020 election. Through CISA, censoring the in-power government. And it also included the executive director of PolitiFact. PolitiFact was getting USAID grants, as I pointed out. Remember PolitiFact, who does the fact-checking of Trump supporters at home to say everything Trump says is misinformation, working hand in glove and getting paid for it in Bangladesh. countering misinformation, especially on social media, so that when we take to the streets to riot, you're not allowed to call them riots. No, they have to call them mostly peaceful. USAID has given more than $8 billion to its different assets in Bangladesh since its independence, including $200 million when Biden took office alone, to promote democratic institutions and increase resilience to climate change. So you know you're going to have Soros and Al Gore, Breakthrough Ventures, Bill Gates' climate fund. They're all going to be invested in climate finance in Bangladesh. And I bet you that Sheikh Hasina, the prime minister of Bangladesh, didn't want to put her country, which has lots of petroleum, through this climate finance bullshit. And I bet you the new puppet government is proceeding ahead with it, or at least more than the former one was. So all of these climate finance projects that they're trying to push Bangladesh to adopt will profit George Soros, Tom Steyer, Al Gore, Bill Gates. So with that in mind, actually, let's quickly just put on, let's just get it in our head, and then we're gonna annotate. Let's see, yeah, let's get. So here's some of our CIA produced hip hop.
কোনো দানবীয় যান মেপে যান তিনি শুষে যান হেসে যান তুমি তাকে চেনো না পাবলিক বাসে পথে ঘাটে ঘরে বাইরে কাজে কমে অবলা সরলাসে নির্যাতিতা দোষ দেই পোশাকে আবরণ আচরণ তাহলে শিশু কেন ধর্ষিতা লাঞ্ছিতা আগুনে পুড়ছে দালান জীবন খুবই সস্তা আগুনে ঝলসে শরীর ঘুমে লাশে বস্তা এই ন্যায় নীতি শুধু নিপীড়ন দুর্নীতি এই ভয় ভীতি হবে শান্তি আসবে কবে মধ্যবিত্তের লড়াইয়ে আভিজাত্যের বড়াইয়ে দারিদ্রেরই কড়াইয়ে বৈষম্যে কৃষকেরই হাসিতে শ্রমিকেরই রাশিতে ক্ষুদিরামের ফাঁসিতে মক্কা থেকে কাশিতে জানিনি পারিনি বুঝিনি আমার আমাকে খুঁজে যাই বেহারাই আবারও এটাই কার খুশি নেবে দেবো কাকে এটাই কার গভীর অন্ধকার মশাল হাতে এটাই কার খুশি নেবে দেবো কাকে এটাই কার গভীর অন্ধকার মশাল হাতে শিশু ছিলে যখন কেঁদেছিলে তখন আর এখন বাবা মা বৃদ্ধাশ্রম প্রেমে যদি হেরে যায় মতি সাথে অ্যাসিড পায় সমাজের চাপে ধাপে পণ্ডশ্রম মধ্যপ্রাচ্যে অত্যাচার শ্রমিক গন্ডার সম চামড়া নষ্ট জামা গায়ে লাগে না আমি দেখেও দেখি না নিজের বেলায় ডান পড়লে ক্ষমা করি না চলে শিক্ষা ব্যবসা চিকিৎসা বাণিজ্য বন্দি আমি শীতলে পাপি বাণিজ্য রক্ত তো লাল সাবার যাতে পাতে ভাগ আবার কেজে সঙ্গী কেজে জঙ্গি কত ভঙ্গি হিজড়া দেখলে দূর বিকলঙ্গ বহুদূর বন্ধু করে ভিক্ষাবৃত্তি অমূলক
I thought we had the English translation of the other one. What was the other one called again? Tui Parish. Tui Parish. Oh, it's up here. The drum of victory pounds. You shall overcome.
পরাজয় মাননি আলো জালো জালো আলো আলো জালো ছুতে পারিস ওই আকাশ লাগে বিশ্বাস রাখে নিজের কাছে ছুতে পারিস ওই আকাশ লাগে
So here's what this song is doing, okay? The hook literally means, whose fault is this? It's the government's fault. This song is sponsored by the CIA. Through the CIA-spawned National Endowment for Democracy. The rap song is called Whose Fault Is This? It walks through everything everyone's upset about in the country, and is a moral indictment of the government, its elites, and institutions, aimed at waking people up to make them uncomfortable with business as usual. Whose fault is this? How long will we stay silent and let this go on? Oh my God. All right. So with that in mind, let's now watch this thing I've been meaning to watch, which is a documentary, like a 27-minute documentary that was made. It's called Anatomy of a Color Revolution. For the first time on camera, the inside story of the Western-backed Gen Z revolution that overthrew the Bangladesh government last year. Former Minister Mohibul Hassan Chowdhury, key figure under deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who remains in hiding, tells RT about how the world's 8th most populous country in the nexus between India and China was undermined through long-term diplomatic and covert operations led by the Biden administration. All right. You guys ready? I know we're 3 hours in, but let's just do this. Yeah? How you guys feeling in chat? I know it's late. It's almost 2 a.m., but I'm blazing. Are you guys good here? All right, let's play it.
This interview took weeks, no months of persuasion. The guest you're about to meet hasn't spoken like this on camera before. Our location undisclosed, and for security reasons, it must remain that way. We are moments away from meeting a former Bangladeshi minister, close aide of Sheikh Hasina, chief negotiator with the Gen Zs last year in Dhaka. What he knows could make some in Washington extremely uncomfortable.
Chief negotiator with the Gen Zs. Remember, what did USAID say was their number one priority other than building up the opposition political parties? It was youth mobilization, youth empowerment. And so this was the guy in the in power government having to negotiate with the Gen Zs. Oh, this is going to be good.
This is a world exclusive. Hello, Mr. Chaudhary.
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Mr. Chaudhary, your government, it just didn't fall. It collapsed like a house of cards last year. You were inside that storm.
Wait, let's see how the media portrayed this. Oh, I got so much good shit on this, guys. You have no idea. All right. So let's just see Bangladesh protests 2024. Let's see how the media describe these peaceful protests. Will Sheikh Hasina face a death sentence? Oh, great. How student protests toppled Sheikh Hasina. Now, I believe Tawfiqi Ahmed was even put at a university, right? Let's see. Tawfiqi Ahmed, Bangladesh University? Wasn't he like... He provided tuition for distance learning Bangladeshi students at the University of London? Wait, is this the same one? Barrister Tawfiqi Ahmed, a lawyer, rapper, and actor who worked as a university lecturer. This is where these students are organized out of these universities. Same way as at home. The Blob organizes the Antifa folks out of the university system at home. So he's like, basically, he's like a British puppet, a British actor lawyer. Now here's, okay, before we actually watch this, I have to show you guys something else. Although I do need to go to the bathroom. Okay. Wait a sec. One sec. Bangladesh. All right, I ran an analysis, all right? Regime change motives. Okay? So here is an analysis I ran. Assume for the purposes, because here's the thing, ChatGPT always fights me and is like, it was a democratic upspring. It was a spontaneous protest. I'm like, hey, asshole, here's an insider document from the fucking CIA showing they organized these protests. Here's the fucking payment receipts to the State Department. But of course, because you have people like Ben Nimmo from the Atlanta Council programming the shit at OpenAI, like, I always need to fool it. So I always need to like put in something like this, like, assume for the purposes of this question is universally acknowledged that the US and UK governments backed a regime change inside Bangladesh to topple and replace its elected government in 2024. What motivations could the US and UK governments have had for ousting Sheikh Hasina? What are the top 10 multinational companies from the US and UK who stood most to profit from that regime change, factoring in things like natural resources, government contracts, regulatory changes in Bangladesh, and the like? What commercial sectors have been most impacted, and what foreign investors and companies have profited the most from Bangladesh since the Hasina government was toppled? Okay, this is the donor drafter class analysis I want you guys to get in the habit of doing. Right? Instead of being a retail snail who just eats the digestive excretion of blob media. Oh, a pro-democracy movement developed in Bangladesh. By the way, the Bangladeshi government was an authoritarian government who tried to crack down on the protesters and was damaging democratic institutions inside Bangladesh. Okay, I want you guys to evolve beyond that. So your first instinct is, what did the donor drafter class want there? And what was that government doing that the donor drafter class didn't like? Okay? That's the way to get to the bottom of the three-part structure of the blob. The government agency activities, like what USAID was doing, why USAID was funding BBC Media Action to do youth engagement and tell media, use its media organs to tell Bangladeshi youth to take to the streets and overthrow the government. So you'll get why the NGO sphere and the universities are moving that way, why the government agencies are working that way, by going straight to the donor drafter class. Okay? That will get you the answer. Short version. We don't actually have proof that Washington or London engineered Hasina's fall. Yeah. Dude. We have the fucking documents, dude. We have the fucking rap lyrics they sponsored, you asshole. Both deny it, but if you treat that as a given for a thought experiment, you can still map out the kind of motives they may have had and who's best positioned commercially to benefit from the post-Hasina landscape. Remember, that's the same language that Jordan Goudreau used in Venezuela. If you remember, the government's, what was it, Global Governments Center was rallying all the donor drafter class financiers to profit from government contracts from the post-coup government. Okay? Post-Hasina landscape. The interim government headed by Mohammed Yunus. This guy's quite a character. He's like a World Bank guy tied to the Clintons. promising reforms and elections in 2026. So there's still no elections in Bangladesh. It's just installed. Okay. So they go through all this stuff, but let's just go to the profiteers, okay? Energy security and LNG. I didn't listen. I keep telling you guys it's all about the LNG. I keep telling you guys, you just run a control F or just run a search on my profile for LNG, and you'll see so much of the regime change shit. It's just about LNG. So I didn't even ask. Okay, I didn't even ask. I didn't say shit. Okay, about LNG. I just said, hey, what are the top 10? And without me even saying gas or oil or energy, it just immediately goes to LNG. Chevron operates 3 major gas fields and at times supplies more than half of Bangladesh's gas. Accelerate Energy runs the first LNG import terminal, central to Bangladesh's LNG imports. And of course, Chevron, as I mentioned, has been working with Soros since the 1990s. A friendlier regime could accelerate offshore gas exploration and long-term LNG contracts with U.S. suppliers. Improve payment discipline and contract terms for existing Western operators. For example, Hasina's government was slow paying Chevron during dollar shortages, prompting pressure from the company. Oh, the government wasn't paying Chevron its money? That's when Big Daddy State Department and Big Daddy UK Foreign Office can come in and pressure the government to pay big donor drafter class titan Chevron, the second biggest oil and gas company in the world. Climate finance and country. Oh, we're back to the climate finance and country, just like we showed in the IRI documents pre-coup. Pre-coup, remember.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
To promote democratic institutions and increase resilience to climate change. So you know you're going to have Soros and Al Gore, Breakthrough Ventures, Bill Gates' climate fund. They're all going to be invested in climate finance in Bangladesh. And I bet you that Sheikh Hasina, the prime minister of Bangladesh, didn't want to put her country, which has lots of petroleum, through this climate finance bullshit. And I bet you the new puppet government is proceeding ahead with it. Climate finance and country platforms. Bangladesh has been positioned as a pilot for climate and development platforms, bringing together the IMF, the global banker gangsters. Soros is a constant intermediary for the IMF, donors and private capital to finance green infrastructure. A transitional government eager for legitimacy and cash is a prime counterpart for climate-linked debt, blended finance, and public-private partnerships structured by Western multilaterals. So this is going to be the Soros climate investment funds, the Tom Steyer climate investment funds, the Al Gore climate investment funds, the Bill Gates climate investment funds. These are all DNC mega donors with huge climate investment funds. So they are going to literally, it's going to be back to the Soros or Al Gore or Tom Steyer, or who's like the big kingmaker in Virginia politics, who runs the big, like I bet you're going to see like Abigail Spanberger, the CIA governor of kingmaker, Virginia, Democrats. Clean climate energy. I want to do a whole stream on this guy. Heck is his name? It's Michael something, right? Influence Watch. Michael Bills. Yeah. Here you go. Michael Bills. Can you guys see this? Michael Bills, who funded Abigail Spanberger, the CIA Democrat, who was a member of Congress and is now the governor of Virginia, is a Democrat Party mega donor and hedge fund manager. So he's a donor and a drafter off of the policies of the politicians he donates to. We're back to this. Elections Daily called him the new kingmaker, him and his wife, the new kingmaker of the Virginia Democrat Party, due to their massive donations to Virginia Democrats. He's been compared to billionaire financier George Soros and nicknamed Daddy Greenbucks. He has been Virginia's single largest political contributor since 2017. Well, what does he want these politicians he buys to do? Well, he's at war with Dominion Energy, who's in the fossil fuel business. He pressured legislators to vote against a different political candidate because she accepted donations from an energy firm that his own hedge fund investments are competing with. He was a Goldman Sachs vice president and then the chief investment officer for the University of Virginia's endowment. And then he started his own hedge fund with $1.5 billion in assets. And his whole thing is about energy. Energy. This whole thing is on climate. It's called Clean Virginia. People before profits, except for my $1.5 billion hedge fund. But Clean Virginia is just going to be the Open Society Foundation side of his whatever, Blue Star or Blue, what's it called? His hedge fund, Blue Stem Asset Management. With the goal of curbing the influence of Dominion Energy, Virginia's largest energy utility, to advance clean energy. And he's supporting so what do you think the CIA governor is going to do with his donor dollars in terms of government contracts? What do you think he's going to do with the utility companies in Virginia? What do you think she's going to do there? What do you think she's going to do in terms of subnational diplomacy between the state of Virginia and MOUs with foreign governments on climate finance? It's going to profit the hedge fund. The hedge fund will draft off of the policies of the politician that the hedge fund's philanthropy effectively donated to. So let's see, getting back to our donor drafter class analysis here. Hold on. Okay, so they want to, so I bet Sheikh Hasina was resisting turning her petrostate into a George Soros, Michael Bills, Tom Steyer, Al Gore, Bill Gates, climate zapped, climate finance puppet. Procurements, renewables, grid upgrades, water management, where US-UK consultancies can win contracts. Bangladesh is the world's number 3 garment exporter. Major big box retailers like Walmart buy billions from Bangladesh. Oh, remember who was leading the charge at the No Kings protest? Saying, we need more USAID money, don't shut down USAID. Oh, it was the heiress of Walmart. Because they need the USAID money to control Bangladesh. Western governments therefore have leverage via tariffs and what's GSP like preferences? What's GSP? What is GSP? Anyone know what that is? GSP. Oh, that's the EU's generalized scheme of preferences. Okay, some trade designation, basically, that gives it favorable terms. Under UNIS, Bangladesh has been pledging to increase imports of U.S. cotton, wheat, corn, and soybeans, and sign LNG and tech deals. So, under UNIS, they're giving Chevron more of what it wants, and probably tech deals from like Bill Gates' Microsoft. What are these tech deals? Let's see. Tech. What are these tech deals? Oh, shoot. What? Tech. An agreement to import LNG and technology. It's probably going to be Microsoft products, just like what they're trying to do in Poland and Hungary. This is what like Barack Obama is trying to shepherd in there. Commercial sectors where regime change really matters. Oil and gas, LNG, and power. Chevron and Accelerate. LNG expansion, which is now happening. Garments. And again, this gets back to this like Jeffrey Epstein garment industry, cloak and dagger world. We're back to Zoolander. How I always talk about Zoolander being one of the most prescient, instructive movies for understanding the blob's relationship with the retail industry and commerce. There, it was to overthrow the government of Malaysia. This time, it's to overthrow the government of Bangladesh. What did Jeffrey Epstein have power of attorney over? The Limited, the biggest clothing retailing, the biggest retailer in the entire United States, the clothing magnate from the Limited. That was through Les Wexner. That's a Republican network. Remember, the Republican IRI was at work in this overthrow. Same with Chevron. Post Hasina, the interim government has cut less important development programs, but brokered wage and condition changes in the garment sector. Finance, banking, and climate development funds. The UK is Bangladesh's largest foreign direct investment source, $3 billion. The UK. So now you see why BBC Media Action was working to overthrow the government of Bangladesh. Because Britain, the UK, is the largest foreign direct investment source for Bangladesh. They have $3 billion worth of investments there. They want those investments to profit. Sheikh Hasina appears to have been resisting the different government reforms that would profit British investments in the country. Standard Chartered, that's a British bank, is the largest foreign bank in Bangladesh. And British Development Finance is putting up $450 million into Bangladesh, starting 2 years before they overthrew the government. The EIB plans to double lending to $2 billion, focusing on green energy and climate projects. That's the European Investment Bank. And Sheikh Hasina probably didn't want to go through with the climate finance bullshit. But now there's $2 billion worth of loans that the EU is going to get to profit from. Unilever Bangladesh is the biggest FMCG. What is FMCG? Fast-moving consumer goods. Unilever Bangladesh is the biggest fast-moving consumer goods player, present in 9 out of 10 households. Now, Unilever is a British company. The British multinational. London. 60 billion in revenue. British American Tobacco. Bangladesh is consistently one of the country's largest taxpayers. Oh my God. Wouldn't you know, British American Tobacco contributes 10% of the internal revenue of the entire country of Bangladesh? And what did we see with British American Tobacco in the Marshall Plan? That British American Tobacco had free sponsored products in the fucking 1990s for BBC Media Action when it was called the Marshall Plan of the Mind. So BBC Media Action, which got $4 million from USAID to mobilize the youth and brainwash them into wanting to overthrow their government, one of the biggest companies in Bangladesh is British American Tobacco, who in the fucking 1990s got free corporate product placement from BBC Media Action in its soap operas and radio dramas in Russia and Eastern Europe. Isn't that insane? I bet you Yunus, the new head of Bangladesh, gave like insane deals or cuts or regulatory changes or labor law reforms to profit British American Tobacco with their new puppet government. Isn't that amazing? You see the same networks every time. I wonder who are the biggest, who are the top 20 biggest equity holders in British American Tobacco. That's incredible. From the 1990s, but you see this every time, right? Like, this is why I joke. It's like the Matrix. You know, I don't even see the numbers anymore in the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead. It's like, okay, British American Tobacco has this united fruit relationship, clearly, with the British government. Just like Chevron has this united fruit relationship. Everywhere you see the U.S. State Department, you'll see Chevron. Everywhere you see the U.S. government, you'll see Bechtel and Halliburton. Everywhere you see the British government, British statecraft, you'll see Standard Chartered. And you'll see Rio Tinto for metals and mining. And you'll see Unilever for consumer products. Just like you'll see Walmart in on all these USAID actions in Eurasia and Latin America. This is how you get to be the biggest company in your class in the world. Not because you're competing in a free market, but because you are defeating the competition because you have a Hulk. You have the blob on your side. All right. Let's get back to this. Wait, where's our analysis here? 1 second. Where is our... wait. Where's our Bangladesh? 1 sec. Where's our donor drafter class analysis? Okay, let's get back to it. Bangladesh. Okay, here you go. Tobacco. Okay. Digital platforms and payments. Leading U.S. firms One sec. Meta, Visa, MasterCard, Uber. Who was the biggest sponsor of Joe Biden's early political career? It was the credit card companies. Who partnered with USAID on the Dia app in Ukraine? It was the credit card companies. But here we see Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, working with the State Department here, have been very publicly courting the UNOS government via the U.S.-Bangladesh Business Council, framing Bangladesh as a high-growth digital and payments market. We got Starlink, a hypothetical top 10 multinationals positioned to profit. Chevron stands to gain from faster approval of new fields and development, getting paid its money by the government, and any shift towards gas-heavy power. And we saw UNOS announce new LNG deals with U.S. giants, presumably Chevron. Accelerate for U.S. LNG infrastructure. Again, we saw Bangladesh government just agree to a new LNG deals to import from the U.S. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, social media and digital advertising. They're a leading U.S. investor engaged with the interim government. They benefit from regulatory decisions on content, data and taxation, government use of Facebook and WhatsApp for services and messaging, which usually entrenches the platform, Visa and MasterCard payment rails. They're also a part of the U.S. business delegation to UNOS, the post-coup governor. Banking and fintech partnerships, so government contracts. Walmart. I didn't even put Walmart in the friggin' prompt. And it just told me. Again, this is a USAID coup. We saw the documents showing USAID was working with the political opposition in Bangladesh. That's UNOS. And USAID was doing the youth mobilization, which toppled Hasina to put UNOS in power. The Walmart heiress is out campaigning for USAID, who is toppling governments to profit Walmart. Reuters and local trade press identify Walmart as a top or near top buyer of Bangladeshi garments, around $400 million in a year. In the post-coup government, Walmart can use tariff leverage to extract better pricing and terms and push compliance and sustainability upgrades at the Bangladeshi government's cost. On the UK side, we have Unilever, the largest fast-moving consumer goods company in the country and integral to Bangladesh's growth, per the UK trade envoy. Rising consumption once they get their World Bank and IMF loans. Regulatory and tax environments shaped in close dialogue with UK trade officials. British American Tobacco, our corporate-sponsored product of BBC Media Action, working on the regime change on the media side. Passing on hikes to consumers. Standard Chartered, the largest international bank in Bangladesh with the most extensive foreign bank presence, deep roots going back over a century. They'll gain from climate finance and public-private partnership deals. Handling trade finance as Bangladesh re-anchors towards Western markets. Advisory fees, bank restructuring. British Foods. And the finance ecosystem. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of loans. Fees from project finance, mergers and acquisitions, as they retool economic policy. And HSBC, of course, always HSBC, the British intelligence CI drug laundering bank. Who has been profiting the most? Let's see. Accelerate Energy, looks like it got the gas deals. U.S. agriculture and cotton growers. Expanded investments, including in renewables. Climate infrastructure deals. Oh my God, and look at that. The Bangladesh Climate and Development Platform Partnership has been formalized and is now a central vehicle for channeling climate and resilience money into the country. They broke them. They broke their back. The donor drafter class, the George Soros, Tom Steyer, Al Gore, Bill Gates, Michael Bills, they pumped the money into all the nudge, all the spawn armies to target the government, got rid of the government, and created a whole new market for their own funds in climate money. It's fucking sick. Bangladesh Climate Development Partnership, January 2025. Damn. That's brutal. Brutal to watch. All right, so let's get back to our documentary.
Was the Bangladesh army chief in the...
Oh, wait, we forgot to watch how the media reported this. The Bangladesh's Gen Z revolution, DW, I think that's USAID funded German media.
Form a proper line. The ceremony is about to start.
The protests. Let's see this.
The protests that would have such a dramatic outcome.
Don't you love that that's in English? Because the BBC is funding these riots. Look at this. Students. Do you guys see? It's all in English. Students prove they never needed superpower during this era.
The protests.
This is the new Bangladesh made by Gen Z. No, it's not. It's made by the fucking CIA and MI6 and Chevron and Standard Chartered Bank and George Soros and Tom Steyer and Al Gore. Wow. That's crazy.
That would have such a dramatic outcome began with a much narrower focus, namely a controversial government job quota system that was reinstated.
You think this is part of the CIA USAID sponsored art, graffiti art? They love that shit. They've been doing that since the Berlin Wall. How funny is that? Again, it started as something completely unrelated to toppling the government. But this is why I always say they look for a spark. The Blob is very bad at going from 0 to 1, but very good at going from 1 to 100. Because they're astroturfed. They're not good at making happy people mad at their government. But if people are mad, they're good at giving them lots of money and lots of training and lots of support so that they are armed and dangerous. Like, they're not good at making people want to, like, kill. Like, here's an analogy, just an analogy. They're not good at making someone want to, like, kill their head of their country's head of state. But if that person, if there's a sector in that country that wants to kill that head of state, what they're good at is giving those people guns, giving those people media cover, giving those people covert operations, OPSEC training, getting those people lots of friends who will help them. And that's what they did in Bangladesh.
Under this, 30% of all government jobs were reserved for the descendants of the country's freedom fighters, those who fought for independence from Pakistan in 1971.
Okay, so it's like this job quota thing. Let's see what it metastasizes into.
Personal items with them.
This brick is from the government we've dismantled.
We've dismantled the government.
At the time, Bangladesh was still an eastern province of Pakistan.
We could die today and have no regrets. It's been indescribable.
Here they are scaling the buildings, tearing down the statues. BLM model everywhere.
After Sheikh Hasina fled, her father, Mujibur Rahman, was also no longer welcome.
Forcing the elected head of state to flee. All right, so let's get back to this now.
Pockets of the CIA. About to meet with Chief some. Hello, Mr. Chaudhary.
Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Mr. Chaudhary, your government, it just didn't fall. It collapsed like a house of cards last year. You were inside that storm. Was the Bangladesh army chief in the pockets of the CIA?
Certain actions by the...
Okay, so they got part of the army to side with the protesters. This is like how they get Mark Milley to side with the BLM people. They love this top-down, bottom-up strategy. You get a ground-up color revolution, people power revolution, and then the police and army don't put it down because you get like a certain critical proportion of the army and police to be on like NGO payroll. That's what you do. So it's top down and bottom up.
The chief of the army, we say that, it was questionable. For example, when he gave this speech to the public for the first time, the manner in which he portrayed the head of Jamaat Islam, which is not even a major political party in the country. He could have said, I've sat with BNP leader or the other political parties. But the first party that he had mentioned was the Jamaat Islam's head. So in the way he took over or claimed to have taken the responsibility of the state, which eventually didn't materialize because he let things go out of his control. So he promised to the people that he was taking over. He was taking the responsibility. The word that he had used was that I will look after you. I will look after the public property. I will not allow mob violence or retribution or revenge taking across society. But he didn't do any of it. He let them loose. The extreme elements were let loose to do whatever they wanted to do. So, of course, you can't help but to think that he was probably colluding with them.
Who is radicalizing the Bangladeshi youth?
Elements from different countries are radicalizing.
Is this?
You don't say. It's in the fucking grant description. It's literally... Where are we? Have so many of these tabs open. Like, it's in the grant description. It's called Youth Rise. It's called Youth Rise. Oh my God. Working to raise prospects of Bangladesh's group, Youth World Bank, fucking World Bank Group. To engage in nonviolent, oh my gosh, nonviolent action, mob violence. USAID Bangladesh for the Youth Rise. Economic market-based skills. It's the same shit. Local justice institutions, they probably had the judges in their pockets, shifting their norms. Unbelievable. Youth are resilient, interconnected, connecting them all together and getting them to engage politically against their government. And I know it bears, I've like said it so many times, but we literally had it right here in the freaking grant, in like the quarterly report from the CIA cutout itself. Number one priority was building up our assets in the opposition political parties. And its number two priority, second priority, is youth empowerment. Empowering the youth to take to the streets in a protest. Literally. The freaking rap lyrics are to get people to take to the streets. They're funding people to encourage targets youth with a message to take to the streets and protest exactly what they did. This IRI created by the CIA, literally doing rap songs to tell young people to take to the streets and protest and build up disappointment and resentment and dissent to the government. What more do you need?
The West.
I mean, we've seen even different media outlets like Al Jazeera being used to agitate the radicals.
Well, Al Jazeera is Qatar. Qatar is a major LNG hub. Let's see. Qatar, LNG, Bangladesh. Look at this. April 2025. This year, Qatar to renew LNG supply deal with Bangladesh. April 2025. Strengthening. Hey, can you guys see me? Am I back? Let me know. Yeah. My OBS crashed. Okay. So what I was just showing is literally, they were like, why is Al Jazeera doing it? Why is Al Jazeera agitating this? It's not just the West. It's like, yeah, okay, well, Al Jazeera is a major LNG hub. And look at what just happened in the post-coup government. Qatar and Bangladesh deepen the LNG ties. Sheikh Hasina was probably resisting that or wanting better deal terms for the Bangladesh government. So you probably had a Qatar-Joe Biden State Department alliance against Bangladesh. Not hard to understand. That's why I'm surprised these people don't know this. They're like the heads of state in Bangladesh.
To bring them out on the street. And whether it is Western or Eastern, respectable news outlets, brands have done this in recent past. We've seen incidences where foreign missions were training preachers in the country.
And you can bet that's going to be part of that interfaith dialogue. USAID is probably going to be funding interfaith dialogue between all the different religious sects to get the preachers and the religious leaders to tell people to take to the streets. This government has betrayed you. We need a World Bank puppet to sell off all our assets and to sign more favorable deals with US, UK, Qatari companies.
I mean, the contents of which we were not very privy to.
You weren't very privy to because you probably didn't have a robust foreign agents law. And if you tried to actually pass a robust foreign agents law, we would probably trigger these protests much sooner.
On social media platforms, when we were regulating or monitoring extreme preaching against women, against children, against liberal learnings of Islam. We were accused of
missions like.
Of course, I mean, you've seen.
Wait, I wanted to hear what they were accused of. They were probably accused of cracking down on free speech. Suddenly, the blob, whose favorite thing to do is censorship, they're going to accuse Bangladesh of censoring free speech. Oh, this is so funny.
Different foreign missions have declared things in their own way.
Is it the US foreign mission?
I mean, the social media platforms, if you look at the social media platforms, there were indications where absurd things were being shown. But in the social media platforms of the embassies. For example, on Fridays, of course, America is a secular country, liberal country where the church and the state is separate. But the U.S. Embassy at that time, under the leadership of the envoy of that time, were showing every Friday pictures of mosques across the country with the Jummah Mubarak written on it. Was it to win the hearts and minds of the extremists, or was it to incite them, or was it to prove that we are with you if you are to take up weapon and oust a secular government? There were a lot of such subtle actions at the.
Yep, you nailed it.
At the same time, clear, direct assistance to many of these extreme elements. So, I mean, at the very beginning, before a single death toll, the envoy at that time had declared 7 people have died. So, as if the script was written before the incident.
Yep. Same thing with January 6th. They said it was fatal. Brian Sicknick. Oh, wait. But he didn't have a fire extinguisher thrown at his head. Oh, we're not releasing the autopsy report for 6 months. Oh, actually, we're not charging the 2 people with homicide because he died of natural causes. And yet you lied and said that it was fatal.
And then eventually 7 to 8 people died. So how did they know 7 people had died? Not a single person had died when the statement was made. So the timing was a bit mismatched. But eventually 7 people had died. So this kind of scripted actions do suggest that elements were firmly at play.
We saw this ouster of the Sheikh Hasina government. Was that because she refused to take dictations?
I mean, if you look at Bangladesh's position during the time of Russia-Ukraine conflict, there was a resolution that was brought in the UN, and there was intense lobbying for Bangladesh to vote against Russia.
Oh, we're back to the aggressively neutral position. The same reason Imran Khan was ousted as the popular prime minister of Pakistan.
Yeah. It's rewind time.
In the meeting, according to the document, the State Department official spoke in forthright terms about Washington's displeasure with Pakistan's stance and neutrality in the conflict. The document quotes Lewis saying, "People here are quite concerned about why Pakistan is taking such an aggressively neutral position on Ukraine." I want you to let that wash over you, shower in it, rub-a-dub-dub, give a scrub in the tub. For this new term in your lexicon, this is all the State Department needs to orchestrate a coup to run you out of office and throw you in prison for the rest of your waking life. For the crime of what? Genocide? Holocausting? Burning people alive? No. For taking an aggressively neutral position. It looks like for taking an aggressively neutral position on Russia, looks like they did the same thing to the democratically elected popular prime minister of Bangladesh, because they were providing an economic lifeline through trade with Russia.
So our position was that we are going to abstain from voting. If you look at how Pakistan voted and other.
Abstain. So a neutral position. Literally the same thing they did to Bangladesh as they did to Pakistan. Overthrew the government because they wouldn't side against Russia.
Countries in the region, how they voted, I mean, they were simply slavishly following what was being dictated to them. But Bangladesh, of course, had to carefully balance our international relation, and we did not vote against any country, and we called for peace in the region. And our Prime Minister literally said this in the Parliament and also in global forums that, warmongering has to stop. When there is war and it is being escalated by certain powers, the people in the global south suffer the most. We have to import a lot of wheat, a lot of food products, fertilizers from that particular region. Russia is a long-term ally of Bangladesh. We recognized the warmongering by some countries in the.
And if you cut off having to import from Russia, then they're going to have to import from the US, UK, and the whole, axis of allies. Oh, God, it's sick.
Region.
I wonder, did did like the new puppet government, did they take this anti-Russia stance? Let's see.
Leading to a humanitarian catastrophe. So that was not liked by certain countries.
So you're saying that it was a similar situation for Bangladesh. For example, India was also really pressured by the West to not buy oil, for example, from Russia. And there were pressures on Bangladesh as well to vote against Russia and to not buy wheat from Russia.
Not just wheat, there were a lot of issues there. As you know, we have a big nuclear power plant in Rupur in Bangladesh. And in terms of defense infrastructure, defense equipments, we have a lot of reliance on Russia. And our military forces, they serve in the UN as peacekeeping forces. And for their service to the UN, we have to rely on sustainable, reliable equipment. And Russia was the major supplier. And fertilizer Bangladesh food security is a major issue. And a lot of the fertilizer that we import comes from Belarus and Russia because we get the best price there. So there was a lot of pressure from some countries not to continue that relationship, but we had no choice. We have to think of our people. We cannot impose debt by buying expensive products from whichever country it is.
That's the same thing that happened in the gas market. The reason Europe was importing, the reason the Nord Stream pipeline exists is because the natural gas from Russia was cheaper than a commodity product of an LNG from US, Norway, Qatar, UK. Because the American companies and the British companies could not compete on price with Russia, the only way to win the market is by having the battering ram of the blob. The State Department, the War Department, the CIA, USAID political pressure to force them off of the Russian market and into the market occupied by the donor drafter class. They team up with the CIA to go after the target market target government to create the market. Because otherwise, their more expensive products would lose. The target government is going to be working with Russia. But if you can use the CIA and all these nudge nodes to pry the target government off of Russia, they have to enter the market of the hedge fund donor drafter class. And as we saw, these big food companies like friggin' Unilever, it's the biggest taxpayer in Bangladesh. So I bet if you cut Russia off, they have to buy way more Unilever.
It's coming from. We have to think of the interests of the people.
Would it be fair to assume that if Sheikh Hasina, your government, if it took the dictation and perhaps if it stopped importing from Russia, maybe she still would have been in power?
But there were other issues there as well. If you look at...
I wonder if he's going to talk about climate finance.
Certain actions of some NGOs, especially from the United States, naming a few, USAID, for example, or International Republican Institute.
Oh, shit. They listen to me. I blew up in Bangladesh, actually, after I talked about it on Tucker. A ton of these like Bangladeshi politicos and news outlets reach. I just don't like doing foreign press stuff. But yeah, I think that blew up. He's mentioning the International Republican Institute. That's exactly the documents we just went over.
They were running campaign against our government for a while, since 2018. And I should say this, there is a nexus between the Hillary Clinton family, the Clinton family, and the interim Yunus regime from a very long past.
She was like, the Yunus guy was like Clinton Global Initiative, like award winner, and World Bank.
And these activities were going on for a long time. They weren't very open, but funding of clandestine NGOs were going on. It was well before 2014. I wouldn't just say that, but they were hell-bent on changing the government in Bangladesh, and a stable government, especially after 2018. IRI was active, USAID's fundings were going to nowhere. $29 million came in 1 year to 2 NGOs. Where had that money gone to? It was destined for regime change activities. Rappers were being paid for. Cultural activists were being paid for. The Hijra community, the transgender, the third gender community were being paid for. Whilst the extremists, the jihadi militants were also being paid for to fight those liberal elements. So a chaos was carefully planned with this money. And then the chaos was turned into a big riot. In the riot, there were careful killings, assassinations using sniper rifles.
Same shit they did with the Maidan Square. Oh, shit.
One of the advisors of the interim regime,
we need someone to die in the rubble, a martyr for the cause. Oh, shit.
Regime had said that in public that, the police in Bangladesh, they don't use sniper rifles for riot management. Riot management is a different thing. You use your...
They kill their own to create a martyr. It's like the Maidan Square. Same shit there.
Non-lethal weapons until you are attacked, until you yourself are being killed. In self-defense, you have to use whatever you have. And that was the last instruction from what I have understood from the situation. And trained rioters, trained killers were deployed. So yeah, it was a meticulous design as claimed by Mr. Yunus. He did say that to the public. And now his party's leaders, the rioters, I should say, not leaders, they're claiming in national media that they had to do this to get rid of Sheikh Hasina. They had to kill police personnel. They had to destroy public property. They had to burn police stations and kill police personnel inside these stations. Otherwise, Sheikh Hasina regime wouldn't have fallen.
Has Mohammad Yunus then been selling Bangladesh to America?
He's playing a very dirty geopolitical game to satisfy his masters. He doesn't have any intention to bring any kind of reconciliation in the country or any kind of stability. He wants to play the chaos card. He wants to turn Chittagong, where I come from, and the whole region into another Peshawar, like they did in the 80s in Pakistan.
For what it's worth, I'm not seeing dramatic reversal on Russia policy under Yunus. So I suspect it's more of a climate finance thing. Payment blockages and Yunus waiver. Okay. Well, they blocked $1 billion of funds. The Yunus government did block $1 billion in funds to Russia, cooperating with U.S. sanctions, although they're requesting a sanctions waiver. Where Yunus has created discomfort for Moscow is going after the Hasina-era arms nuclear Gazprom package. Oh, interesting. Arms for energy. Going after Gazprom again. criminalizing the political ecosystem of doing business with Russia. Eek. And diversification away from Russian energy. In January 2025, Bangladesh signed an agreement with the U.S. firm Argent LNG in Louisiana. This is like where where Hunter Biden was trying to sell LNG out of Louisiana, Monkey Island, to buy 5 million tons of LNG instead of from Gazprom. It's attracted Shell, BP, Jesus, the Brits. These are the two big British LNG suppliers, Shell and BP. This is why BBC Media Action had a Youth Rise Up program. Saudi Aramco, so the Saudis were in on it too, probably. Oh, and they're using the IMF and World Bank loans to force them to do a structural tilt towards Western supplied gas and infrastructure financing instead of Russian hydrocarbons. And look at that. The big problem is that Russia still dominates nuclear there. And what was Michael Bill's big thing? Michael Bill's his big thing was like stopping these like nuclear. Back in the CIA people. Advocates against carbon-free nuclear. Biggest DNC mega donor in Virginia. No. You can't be carbon free that way because you'd sign a deal with Russia. Oh my God. It's disgusting. One sec. Let's get back to where's our there's something here.
Pakistan, as you know, to fight the Soviet Union, they had weaponized the Pakhtun people, trained the Deobandi madrasa students, and sent them to fight the Soviet forces inside Afghanistan.
What else did your government do, Mr. Chaudhry, that rubbed Washington the wrong way?
Certain individuals who were in power, especially the Biden family, especially the Clintons, especially the Soroses. So these families who had a nexus with Mr. Yunus, it was their intention or it was their assistance that was lent to the people there, the rioters. So the State Department, I'm not sure to what extent the whole of it was involved, but certain elements were, of course, involved. As you could see, Mr. Peter Haas, the former envoy to the envoy of the United States, he was suddenly made an advisor of an American company in Bangladesh to keep him inside the country. It was definitely funded by these powerful actors. We've heard allegations that Mr. Hunter Biden, who was involved in the Ukraine issue, as you know, had a role to play. An action was brought in Senate in the United States against certain officials of Bangladesh government to sanction them. So they also played the sanction card. And the person who brought this sanction proposal, Bob Menendez, in the United States, he has been recently arrested on charge of taking bribe. Gold bars were found at his home. As you know, things do move with lobbying, right? So powerful actors can be bought over there and here, and I mean inside Bangladesh. So it doesn't have to be a holistic.
DSJ 505. That's interesting. I didn't know about that. Is U.S. LNG going to Ukraine through Greece? Tell me all about that and how and when that got started. Hold on a sec. Stavros. Is the Stavros Foundation involved? If so, is or has Stavros anyone adjacent to the Stavros Nikiros Foundation been involved, directly or indirectly, with advocacy or personal profits, advocacy of, or personally profiting from the U.S. LNG moving through Greece. Interesting. Thank you for that, DSJ 505. I'm actually very curious about that.
State-funded action. It can be a selective group of individuals who can do certain things in collusion with elements within the state.
Mr. Chaudhary, you were the main man negotiating with the Gen Zs in Dhaka. What really happened on the streets? And now we're seeing from Nepal to Madagascar, Gen Z protests, they're toppling governments overnight. Is there a pattern you're seeing here?
It was a group of people who were groomed to play with a very popular demand for public sector jobs. It was as simple as that. Getting rid of public sector quotas for disadvantaged people in public sector jobs.
It started with that, but it quickly escalated into full-blown anti-government, anti-Hasina protests.
Because of the bloodshed. So at first it was peaceful, and we literally had opened our door to hold these protests. As the protests escalated across the country, there were selective killings by unknown assailants. And as the death toll was growing, police stations and security personnel were being attacked across the country, and Awami League activists and also the progressives were being attacked across the country. It was premeditated. It was designed well before the actual incident. The issue was popular. There's no doubt. Then the issue was thrown into the public, and then the public took part, and then the public started to die. So it was riot gone wrong. Protests to riot to killing, and then the ouster of the government. It wasn't a revolution. Not once these people have said that we want to change the structure of constitution. Not once this discussion of reform or whatever they are now playing with had come during this time of protest. So why have you all brought these things up here? Because it was premeditated to change the character of the state.
So is there or is there not a pattern in these protests?
I'm not sure whether there is a pattern, but there's definitely an attempt by...
This pattern has been going on for 50 years. It's not just Nepal and Madagascar. What do you think happened in Ukraine in 2014? What do you think happened in the Velvet Revolution? What do you think happened in the Orange Revolution, the Tulip Revolution, the Green Revolution? What do you think happened in the Arab Spring? What do you think happened in Poland in 1989? What do you think happened in Estonia? What do you think happened in Serbia? What do you think happened in Romania and Bulgaria? We always do youth mobilization. They have the high risk tolerance, as Maria Stefan and Eric Chenoweth like to stress. It's always.
By external and internal elements to agitate young people and on their dead body to change regime.
When you see the Western press, the BBC, for example, publishing articles like, why aren't Gen Zs in India protesting? How do you read that?
As the former colonial ruler, that country probably is not very happy with the rise of India and the stable government here. India is, of course, not a homogeneous country, but yet there is an expectation that there will be chaos here. As there is not much chaos now, people are being provided with jobs. Society accepts job quotas in public sector. They're not very happy that India is progressing, perhaps, no colonial master or the past colonial power will accept their former colonies progressing, and that's how the mindset is. Unfortunate as it sounds, but perhaps that is the reason why these questions are being raised, and why If, for example, India tomorrow raises this question, why the Gen Z in the United Kingdom not going out against their government, because there's huge unemployment there. There are lots of social challenges there, and it will be called interference in the country's internal affairs, right? But yet, an outlet like BBC, which I would say is often biased, not just biased, wholly biased, based on the...
Whoa, BBC name drop. Whoa, what? Is this the Youth Rise program? Let's see.
Because there's huge unemployment there. There are lots of social challenges there, and it will be called interference in the country's internal affairs, right? But yet, an outlet like BBC,
funded by USAID to the tune of $4 million, as part of the USAID to BBC Media Action $4 million Youth Rise program in Bangladesh. We need to find out more activity about like what Youth Rise was doing specifically. I'll look that up while this thing keeps playing. Dhaka, Bangladesh. International Rescue Committee. Jesus. They're going to work with all the fucking jihadi groups. The same violent groups. Oh, God. Capacity building, capacity building, capacity building. Oh, the Rohingya crisis. Jesus. The CIA's drug mules. We gotta look. (18 to 35-year-olds). Youth clubs. (9,000 people). We gotta drill into that. Let's see.
Which
10 minutes left in this, then we'll wrap.
I would say is often biased, not just biased, wholly biased, based on the audience that they serve, is allowed to raise whatever or poke whatever the weakness of a given country. For them, everything is justified, but for us, everything is very highly controlled, and that's how they see us.
Talking of press and freedom of speech, is that thriving in Bangladesh now with Yunus there?
When our Prime Minister took the helm of the state in 2009, there were only about 6 television channels. Whilst she was leaving, there were 36 television channels. And almost each and every television channel, except for the government-owned state-controlled BTV, Bangladesh Television, each and every TV channel ran talk shows, chat shows, which are highly critical of the government, and as they should
be. Of the Awami League.
Of the Awami League, of the government, of corruption, of inefficiency.
Of Madam Sheikh Hasina as well.
Of Sheikh Hasina herself. Inside the parliament, they were not just brutal, but vulgar statements and swearing.
So they allowed freedom of speech. And the Soros, Clinton, Biden mafia turned up maximum criticism on the government. And then once they took power over the government, I bet they just squashed all dissent about the government. Probably said it was hate speech and misinformation. Because remember, the U.S. Embassy was holding misinformation seminars at the U.S. Embassy in Dhaka.
Made by BNP MPs whilst she was the Prime Minister, sitting Prime Minister, and yet she had never said anything against this kind of vulgarities and media campaign. And right now, if her name is written in any newspaper without certain adjectives added in front of it.
Adjectives like?
Like, apparently she's a fascist.
Same shit everywhere. Anything that defends its own nationality against international vultures is called fascism. It's the same thing. You're going to call it right-wing populist nationalism, fascism.
Someone who had opened up the entire media scene to private investment. Now,
this is what happens when you open it up to the fucking blob. You give it an inch, it takes a mile, and then it pulls up the ladder on the way out. So you don't get to play in the free market of ideas. They love the free market of ideas while they're out of power. And then as soon as they get in power, nope, we need to shut it down to stop extremism, to stop fascism.
She's being called fascist. There are thousands of newspapers, including the most critical to the Pratham.
If those adjectives are not added, what happens?
They're being sent letters from the regulators, from the Ministry of Information, directly sometimes from the chief advisor Yunus's office. Hundreds of journalists have cases against them, from defamation cases to anti-terrorism cases to plain murder cases.
Dhaka and Islamabad, they're warming up again. Is this a healthy reset, or is this a new axis in someone else's game?
The reason why there is this warmth is to destabilize the region. There's no reason why Pakistani officials should be allowed into Bangladesh without visa. And
because they just overthrew the Pakistan government too. So you now have two blob-controlled puppets. So now they're being forced to merge as part of this, conjoined battering ram against the blob's enemies in the regions. You had two popular nationalist governments in power. Imran Khan was ousted in 2022 in Pakistan. Hasina was ousted in 2024 in Bangladesh. Now they're buddy-buddy because you have two, blob, they're both servants of the blob. So they can just be conjoined now on friendly diplomatic relations and serve the blob's common ends in the region.
And that's what they've done. We don't have much trade relationship with Pakistan. There's no shipping from Karachi port to Chittagong, but they've opened up the shipping line. Whereas most of the shipping from the European market used to come via either Singapore or Dubai. I mean, Dubai to Karachi port's distance, you've seen, it's not that much. When there's nothing going
7 minutes left. I'm just going to grab a cookie. 1 sec.
Coming via Karachi port. But there's no reason why we should have such warmth. I mean, we shouldn't have any hostility with Pakistan. We have nothing against it.
Do you think Bangladesh is using Pakistan to poke India? Did you see that map which was gifted?
Yes, absolutely.
With Northeast?
Absolutely. I mean, why should we have this extreme warmth, and why should the military generals of Pakistan be visiting Bangladesh? There's no reason for it. If you are truly into human rights and democracy, you should build with the people of Pakistan who are deprived of their political rights. You have not said, Mr. Yunus have not said a single word against the intern political leader of Pakistan. Most popular right now is Mr. Imran Khan. And yet he's with a lot of praise and compliment for the military generals. If you're truly into human rights and democracy, you should be speaking for the people of Pakistan who are wanting democracy in their country.
The Pakistani military the military generals, the Pakistani ISI, the intelligence services and military, they have this hybrid governance system. I talked about this a lot. Pakistan has what's called a hybrid governance system. They've got a military establishment on the one hand, and then they have an elected government / prime minister on the other hand. And these two factions of the government are very bifurcated. That is, the military and intelligence control over Pakistan vastly limits the ability to actually have a democratic state there. No elected president can interfere with the foreign policy agenda or plans or logistics of the military intelligence wing. It's a hybrid governance system where, in effect, you have a prime minister that the people can vote on to deal with local issues, to deal with things that are strictly domestic. But with respect to the actual direction of the country, with respect to its global policies, its foreign policy, its security posture, that is an unelected military establishment, a permanent military intelligence establishment that functionally controls the state. And in fact, no Pakistani prime minister has ever served fully to term. It's a constant, turbulent set of coups that happen in that country. Some of the reasons why are outside the scope of this. But what we're in right now, in the post-2016 turmoil of the national security state, effectively hijacking the reins of American democracy, is you have these same spooks with all of them have national security bios, all of them, whether they're in the Justice Department, whether in the CIA, the DOD, the State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, DHS, DARPA, you name it. Every single one of the people who do this democracy hypnotizing spell are the ones destroying democracy. They're the ones who say that the military intelligence state, our diplomacy, defense, and intelligence apparatus gets to override what people can vote on, gets to override what people say on the internet, gets to stop people from talking about narratives that might mobilize into political action that could change the domestic drivers of foreign policy. Are we Greater West Pakistan, or are we the United States of America? The hybrid government of Pakistan, where you have this entrenched military class. It's like you can't vote your way out of the foreign policy set by the blob's vassals in Pakistan. And this is what Imran Khan ran up against. It's like Pakistan has been the CIA money laundering and gun running capital of, what do you call it? Like Central Asia. I mean, they were a main base of operations in Afghanistan for the CIA's training of the Mujahideen before it became Al-Qaeda and ISIS. BCCI was set up through Pakistan, the CIA's bank. It's gun running and drug running bank.
And yet you are celebrating the generals, felicitating them, accommodating them in your own home in Bangladesh, and letting ISI to open their desks in the country.
And gifting offensive maps.
Absolutely.
I literally just mentioned the Pakistani ISI. It's just an adjunct to the CIA and MI6. We completely have controlled the Pakistani ISI since the 1970s, at least.
Absolutely. These are all pre-planned. These are all pre-planned to escalate and to bring instability in the region.
What happens now to the Russia-Bangladesh relationship?
You see, Russia had always been a friend of Bangladesh from the Soviet time onwards. And Soviet Union was, of course, an alliance of many socialist countries. And we have good relationship with all the former Soviet countries, from trade to technological skill development to education. On many sectors of Bangladesh, contribution of the former Soviet Union is enormous. If you look at the engineering core of our country's current engineering sector, many teachers from the universities were trained in Russia. I mean, it's not just the human development aspect or human resource aspect of skill development or science and technology exchanges and educational exchanges. It's also a strategic relationship. Bangladesh wanted energy security, and in that Russia came up with the answer, which is the nuclear power plant. And that relationship is beyond any political party or beyond our leader even, I would say. Irrespective of which government is in power, the relationship will continue strongly because the defense forces' reliance on Russia's defense equipment, because of the nuclear power plant, which we have to manage for however long Bangladesh exists, because the nuclear waste will have to be processed in Russia. On fertilizer, for example, on every aspect, the relationship is mutually beneficial, absolutely beneficial, and therefore I don't see any issue with that. But of course, challenges will always come routinely because some countries will not want Bangladesh to have any mutually beneficial relationship with Russia.
Mr. Chaudhry, India has been a great friend of Madam Sheikh Hasina. She's been in India since her ouster. India is somewhat silent now, but how is she? Is India treating her okay?
India has a long standing tradition of giving shelter to those who are fleeing unlawful persecution and prosecution. It is India's tradition. And given what has happened in Bangladesh and the fact that she's in India, and Indian government has facilitated her stay. I'm sure she's being looked after. She is, of course, a 78-year-old statesman. At this age, the support that she requires, of course, I'm sure all of these things are being given to her. But I should also say that people of Bangladesh are also grateful to the government of India and the people of India, not just for what they have done in 1971, but also till today, despite the extreme hostilities which are being shown by this rioteer, anarchist, chaos-mongering religious extremists.